EA shut down more studios. We were not prepared. Ghost of Tsushima on PC tomorrow, maybe?
Well, hello and welcome to Chris's creepy opening. No, look, Chris, good job on your random on-the-spot cold opening that I did not prepare you to know that was what I was going to use. But in the midst of you saying it, I realized that it was exactly what I wanted to use. So thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
You sounded like a nervous Morty, almost.
Well, I was trying to remember what I put in the news, and then I managed to say two things that I didn't put in the news, so that's cool.
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That says so. There you are. First and foremost, hello and welcome to Triangle Squared, a PlayStation podcast. I'm your host, Brett Beck, and alongside me, as always, is Mr. Chris Figs. Chris, let the people know how you're doing today.
I am doing just okay, my friend. How are you?
I'm doing just okay as well. But Chris, there's something important that we were talking about right before I hit record, and I decided that even though this is a gaming podcast, we were wasting perfectly good talking points.
Right.
That we could have been talking about. So in just a second, we'll get back into that. But first, if you're new to the show, welcome. We hope you stick around and enjoy the show. It can get pretty hectic and weird at times. We talk about not games sometimes, but primarily we talk about the gaming industry through the lens of being primarily PlayStation fans. With that in mind, we do play everything from PC to Xbox to Nintendo as we see fit and as we think that they have good games worth talking about. But we are primarily on PlayStation. That's primarily where we play. So if that sounds like something that you would enjoy or something that you'd like to hear our thoughts on, then stick around. We hope that you do and enjoy the show. We normally start off with what we've been playing at the beginning of every episode, and we will get to that very shortly so that we can let you know what to keep your eyes on, or if what you've had your eyes on may not be quite what you thought it was. But before we break into that, Chris,
yeah,
let's continue this little conversation about how Adam Sandler is often taken for granted.
Yeah,
or at
least,
much
maligned Adam Sandler.
Yeah, at least his early work at the very minimum. You know, I think it's reasonable to fall off of him now, even though I do think he still puts out solid movies here and there.
Uncut Gems, recent movie.
Yeah, well, I hear Spaceman, his new movie, is quite good from what I understand. Mm-hmm. So with that in mind, we got to the topic of 51st dates. And Chris had an opinion that he seemed to think was a hot take, but I don't completely disagree. And we got there because I said that despite liking plenty of Adam Sandler's movies, that I don't really love Drew Barrymore, and I can't really explain why. Like, I don't hate her. Like when she comes on screen, I'm not like, die bitch. Nothing like that. But I'm just kind of like,
most of the time. Duff.
Well, yeah, that's part of it. I mean, she didn't have a shelf in the back. She's not dragging that wagon. But with that in mind, we were talking about 51st Dates, and Chris, what was your potentially controversial take on that?
No, I just think 51st Dates is a very rapey movie, and it makes me it's an uncomfortable movie to watch. I think, like as an adult with morals, I think that's a really weird movie.
Okay, so Chris, assuming that someone who's listening to this has never seen 51st Dates and doesn't know the premise of it, can we do a quick recap? And then you can use that to explain and leverage into why you view it the way that you do.
51st Dates spoilers, if anyone is worried.
So, if you've not watched this 2004 classic.
Yeah, Adam Sandler falls in love with a woman.
Is it fucking 2004? I don't actually know.
No, Fever Pitch is 2004, though. I know that.
No, dude, 51st Dates is a 2004 film. That really? Was out of my ass, but look, it was educated guessing.
Yes. So Adam Sandler's character falls in love with Drew Barrymore's character, and Drew Barrymore's character has short-term memory loss and can't remember anything that happened the previous day. Now, I find this creepy and weird because Adam Sandler's character marries Drew Barrymore's character and has to convince her every morning through a set of videotapes like fucking Jigsaw. Would you like to play a game? That was a really bad Adam Sandler impression.
That was the worst. Somebody please clip that out. Post it to Twitter and tag Adam Sandler, please.
Yeah, that's.
I'm pretty sure he's not even on Twitter, but Somehow, some way, he needs to see that.
Yeah. So yeah, he has to convince her every morning that they're in love and together, and then they go and spend the day together. It's just full of logical fallacies and issues that are just incredibly creepy, right? Like
the first one, well, look, you know why the movie's complicated to talk about when you actually try and drill into that is that, first of all, the fact that he knew she had short-term memory loss and decided that he was just going to keep pursuing her further.
Right.
There's that. But okay. Secondarily is the problem of, just because she has short-term memory loss, are you saying that she doesn't deserve love? And I'm not saying that you're saying that, but that is arguably, there's no way for her to have love and not require this need to be reminded every day why she loves this person. But it does bring into question a lot of things about what love is. How does love work for someone who can't remember anything from the previous day and they only remember the day that continuously moves further and further away from them?
That's the hot take. Maybe this is fucked up, but Drew Barrymore's character in that movie is not capable of love.
I don't completely disagree, because that love can't be built on a foundation of anything.
No, all that
because
movie
every
is
day that
saying
foundation resets.
Is that if Adam Sandler character was in Fallout 3, he'd have charisma 10. That's all the movie is saying, because he passes a speech check every fucking morning to get her to make him breakfast. Okay, it doesn't make any sense. But the problem is, right, we were just talking about it. If she gets pregnant, okay, every morning this woman is going to have cramps. She's going to be in pain. She's going to be throwing up. She's not going to understand what's happening to her body. And then again, short-term memory loss only remembers one day. One day she is going to wake up and be in the worst pain of her life and not understand why it's happening.
Yeah.
It's look, you know how people say like a comedy
Chris,
becomes a horror movie if you change the music? If this music had the score from Get Out, it's a psychological thriller on the level of Irreplaceable.
It's funny you say that, because I was thinking use the Dexter soundtrack. So like every morning she wakes up and she looks over beside her and you'll start hearing the It's very ominous as she's like, what the fuck? But Chris, I didn't even think about the fact that we were talking about waking up every morning and not knowing what's going on with your body. That's terrible. But you know what else is equally terrible to think about and terrifying? That every morning she'll wake up, at least for the first like couple months, she's going to wake up with a baby beside her, not knowing whose fucking baby it is.
Right.
And she's going to think, using her logic, that either somehow, some way in her sleep, she kidnapped
yeah, and then
you'd
have to think that her husband, Adam Sandler's character, cannot sleep in the same bed as her, right? Because when she goes to sleep and forgets, does she wake up and she's like, what
and
the
beat
fuck?
the shit out of him?
Beats the shit out of him, kills him.
Yeah.
It's an impossible movie to like. I'm sorry.
Someone whose favorite movie is 50 First Dates is like, what the fuck? Yeah, I get why it's cute, Chris, of course. It's lovely to think about going and striving to get this person's love every day for 50 days in a row before you just also go, you know what? I'm just going to marry you now.
Dude, it's just gaslighting the movie. That's all I
want to commit myself for the rest of my life and yours to legally
90
bound
hours
you.
Of gaslighting.
Here's a good question. Legally speaking, is her period for annulment indefinite?
Yes.
Because she has the clear argument of, I don't remember doing this. I don't love this man.
Look, I love Adam Sandler, but it's just me being honest. I'm not saying anything about, I'm not the greatest looking guy either, but Brad Pitt in that era as the lead of that movie makes more sense to me than Adam Sandler of that era as the lead of that movie. Because you can convince me that a woman every day, a woman or man, right, every day wakes up, looks at Brad Pitt and goes, I could do this for the day. I don't know if I feel that way about Adam Sandler. I don't know if I would be confident in myself every morning, like, oh, I got a little bit of a gut today. Is she gonna watch the videotapes?
That's why you like videotape your most ripped, loving version, and you try and make so that videotape is exactly what you said. It's a movie to gaslight the person.
Right.
It just becomes how can I show through video something emotionally pulling enough to make this person who doesn't know me at all believe that not only does she know me, she loves me.
Right, and that's the problem. They
can
don't
we
start
remake?
that movie
You know how
friends.
everybody's doing the remake of things where they're making it suddenly creepy. Why has no one done that to 50 First Dates? Let's remake this, but have it to where a guy who's always looking for a way to take advantage of things comes across a girl who forgets things every morning, and so you slowly start to see him piecing together this lie. Where he's building up, he's filming her when she doesn't know it. He's piecing footage together. He's finding ways when she's asleep in front of her pool to be in the background so he can show that they had a life together. And he makes this movie to convince this woman who doesn't know him at all that not only does she know him, but she loves him implicitly.
I'm not kidding when I say, have you ever seen the show You on Netflix?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm thinking of when I'm saying
season 4. If you told me season 4 of You was 50 First Dates with a new character and a new lead, I'd be like, yeah, that's 100% fair. The problem is, though, you said you would want to record yourself at your best. Strong disagree. You would want to convince her that you guys are in love because of emotions and personality and all that stuff at your absolute worst. It's how I always joke with my friends. I'm like, guys have this problem where they go to a bar and they're like, yeah, I've got this fucking gigantic hog. Like, I got this 8-inch slammer. I'm going to take you to the woodshed. And then they pull out 5 hard. And it's like, dog, like you sold me a lemon here. That's why you go to the bar, you're really funny. And you go, yeah, I got like an 8-inch thing. And when you pop out 4, they're like, hell yeah, bro. I was expecting an inch. I got 4 inches. I can work with this.
See, I call it the Roadhouse effect because Roadhouse has got plenty of problems as a restaurant. I still enjoy it. They don't know how to cook steak the way that I requested at all. I've never been there and been like, hey, give me a medium rare. And I get that. It doesn't matter. No, it does not matter.
You always order a steak 1 temperature below what you want.
Yeah, but dude,
medium
I've done
rare,
that.
You order it rare.
I've done that, and I shit you not. They brought out a fucking blue rare steak. And I was like, what's the... It's like you just went equally in the opposite direction. I was hoping to get a medium or a medium rare, and you give me like the fucking rarest steak I've ever seen in my life. Or you give me one that's just fucking cooked. It's well done, and a well done steak is pointless. If you eat well done steak... You know what? Fuck, shame on you. I'm just going to go there. I'm going to go full on. But look, let's bring this back down for a second. Let's bring this back down. Okay. The Roadhouse effect. This is one thing Roadhouse does excellently. You walk into Roadhouse or you get on the app or whatever and you say, and they say, oh, it's going to be 30 minutes. That's your estimated wait time. And you go, okay. And you mentally prepare yourself for 30 minutes. 15 minutes into that, they call you and go, hey, your table's ready. And you're like, fuck yeah. That was way quicker than I thought. And so your whole evening becomes better because you're starting on the belief that they're already exceeding your expectations.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a good way to live life, right?
It's not a bad way.
Yeah, it's a good way. But you know what? No more 50 First Dates. How about we talk about our 51st games on this episode of Dragons? There we go. All right. No, realistically speaking, going into what we've been playing, Chris, do I have a conversation to have with you? It's a hell of a day. It truly is. But I'm going to go ahead and defer to you first and foremost. What have you been playing? And I hate to say this, but for the 3rd week in a row, we cannot spend 20 minutes talking about Fallout 3.
Are you
we
sure?
just can't. I feel pretty positive that we probably shouldn't do that. But, you know, you can try it and see what I do.
I mean, I don't have a crazy amount to say about Fallout 3. I got the platinum. It's a fantastic game. I love that game. I'm fighting the urge at this moment to not be like, yeah, I could do Broken Steel and get to level 30 and get the 100%. I don't know. I think the only thing I have to do is hit level 30 on each Karma, which is again is just a save scumming thing, and then Mothership Zeta. But Mothership Zeta is really bad, bro. So I don't know that I want to do that.
Yeah, I've never played any of the DLC for those games.
You should. I think it's called Point Lookout in this one.
Yeah, including New Vegas.
And the Pit.
Never
Great.
played any of it.
I played Dead Money for the New Vegas. That's fun. But yeah, Fallout 3, great game. Like, it's fantastic. It's my 135th platinum. It was nice. I was actually really happy. I mentioned it that I thought I was doing this just kind of for myself, and I wasn't going into it with the trophy competition in mind, but I still got like probably around 1,500 points for it. So it was honestly not, the same amount. I spent 40 hours getting the same amount of points I could have gotten in literally 5 minutes, but that's okay. I wanted to play Fallout 3. So it's funny. I was talking to Blake and I was like, I messaged him and I was like, hey, so Fallout 76, talk to me. Because here I am, right? I have Fallout 3, Fallout 4, Fallout New Vegas. All I need to round out the series is 76
level
and
100.
Shelter. Got to get Shelter and 76 done, and then
Does Shelter have a trophy list?
It has a platinum, yeah.
That seems like probably a pretty difficult platinum, thinking about the type of game that it is.
Supposedly, it's pretty easy because you can change your PSN clock, so you can move your hours.
Speed through all the bullshit. Yeah, that's actually it's good. Good example.
So I might go for it, but yeah, I love Fallout 3. I can't wait to play the remaster on PS5.
There you go. Hey, maybe one of these days we'll get their Oblivion too. The nice 4K 60 frames per second Oblivion with a trophy list, because it always sucks to think I couldn't platinum Oblivion if I wanted to. The game just came out before trophies were finalized. Yeah,
they should have just put them in. It's got achievements. That's the one weird thing. It's like, just do the achievements. You have it there. Give it to me, Todd.
What I thought was weird, if I remember correctly, Game of the Year edition came out by the time that trophies were being done.
Yeah, I think so. They just never did it.
They just were like, we don't have any, so fuck it.
Yeah.
It would have been more interesting if Shivering Isles had trophies, but Oblivion still didn't.
Yeah, just this small list of bronzes.
What's funny? I've never played Shivering Isles on PlayStation 3. I played that on 360. Yeah.
I'll go back to Oblivion. Maybe I'll throw that in tonight, because I've been playing my PS3 a lot. Another game on my list here.
Yeah, I mean, it's either that or Skyrim. Those are your two options for Elder Scrolls Platinums. Crazy to think, though, right, that Bethesda put out 3 games in that generation, and then they didn't put out a game for an entire generation.
No, they have Fallout
they put out 4. You're right. That was the only game they put out for the entire generation.
They put out Skyrim Legendary Edition, and then Skyrim Game of the Year Edition, and
you can say Fallout 76
Skyrim Premium Edition.
But as we talked about last time, 76 was not really Bethesda. It's not the same studio.
It's the B team. But yeah, so it's cool because I have the platinum I have the platinum in almost every Bethesda game that you can get one in. So I have Skyrim, Fallout 3, Fallout New Vegas, Fallout 4. So, well, New Vegas doesn't even count. So whatever. But yeah, another game on my list, we played it together. It was Helldivers 2.
My God, Helldivers 2 continues to be a freaking blast.
Yeah.
So I want to have like a micro conversation around that, because we mentioned it last week about how there's a game master, and the more I think about it, like every online game, and there was actually an article that Jehudi MD, one of our patrons, put up in the Discord, where it's like every live service game has essentially a game master. The difference being that most game masters just make a plan ahead of time and stick to that plan. What makes the Helldivers one feel so interesting is the fact that they are micro looking at the game and being like, all right, what's happening on an individual level? What's happening on a macro level? And then they're choosing to make little changes and little nudges on the fly, instead of being like, well, we'll wait until the Christmas events here or the Easter events here or whatever it be. And instead they're just going like, fuck it. They're doing a bit too well against these group of people that we want it to be harder. So we're just going to crank up the difficulty on this enemy type and suddenly change the tide of war because we can do that. And I think that game has emergent feelings in ways that most live services don't. So when I think about what live service is doing, has been doing versus what this is doing, this is a really interesting example of where live service can be done in a way that I think feels far more unique than just a battle pass that you're getting on and going. It's a lot more difficult because it requires little by little changing, but Helldivers as a game that is already randomly generated across the board has the benefit of kind of always feeling a little different every time you jump into a map anyway, which adds a lot to the gameplay. So I am continue to just be floored with that game. Every time I play it, it's like you have one of those moments where you're like, I can't believe that I pulled that off.
Yeah.
Like whenever you jumped and then fell, and I swore that the big bug charger was going to get you, and then you like managed to dive into the ship after you stood back up. And it's just, every second of the game is like, I don't know if I'm going to make it. Definitely when you're playing on suicide mission. Like,
dude, that was, it was a lot. It's one of those things where I love playing it, but it's a time commitment. So I'm almost like,
it's a huge time commitment.
Because even when it was like, because it was the three of us playing the other day, me, you, and Sean, and all three of us were like, that was fun, not doing another one.
Yeah, which is good. Because I think that unlike a game that has the same level of addictiveness that I think Helldivers 2 has, the fact that you know you're spending at least 45 minutes kind of gives you that, like, I shouldn't start another one. I'm just going to go to bed and play again.
I think
later.
It's a detriment and a really great thing to the game where it's like, if we're starting something, we're doing 3 missions. Because that's the thing with Apex, right? For me, it was always one more game. Mm-hmm. But if you had told me, hey, 3 more games, 3 more games, I'm stopping way earlier, right? Because it's just that one more is okay. But then with Helldivers, it's like you're doing 3 and they're all going to be an hour, and good luck. And it's going to be painful for you.
It's exactly what I talked about with Returnal and how I feel like Returnal fundamentally misunderstands is a strong word, but it so strongly deviates from the normal thing that roguelites do, where it's about quick repetition and you die and you go, well, I can do one more run. But if you die in Returnal, it's like, I'm done for today. I'm good. I don't want to do another 2.5 hours to get to where I was, so I'm just going to not play this right now. And that's kind of what Helldivers does. And I think that's a good thing because it keeps me from playing way too late into the night.
Yeah.
Which in my current life situation, I need a little bit of that, Because like I could see you've been playing that Balatro game still, and I know it's on your list. But every time I see you playing it, and then I think about it, I'm like, that's the exact kind of game that I could be like, I could just do one more. And then suddenly it's 3 hours later and you're like, Jesus, what did I do?
Yep. That's happened to me a ton. A ton. Where I guess moving on to Balatro, right, is that game is so fucking good. I love it so much. It's so fun because it's so quick and it's so satisfying. We've talked about it. A lot of the stuff that I like is just seeing numbers go up. And boy, do numbers go up in that goddamn game. I haven't beaten it yet. I've played probably about 10 hours. Haven't beaten the game once. And it was devastating because I had what I thought was the perfect setup. Like, everything was going well because it was to the point where like you can get, I think I talked about it when I first talked about the game, but you can get Joker cards which add multipliers and stuff like that. So I had a Joker card that was red cards match what's it called, match suit, and black cards match suit. And then I had one that gave me ×10 for flushes, and then I upgraded my flushes a bunch. So it was basically every time I had 5 cards of one color, it was a flush. So I was just flying through it. And then I think the boss was an extra big blind, so I had to get 300,000 points, and then I would have beaten the whole game. And I got 200,999,937 points and lost.
Ooh. Ooh.
Yeah, I was real upset, and it's great because it's a blessing and a curse. Because one of the things, if anyone, here's how to cheat Slay the Spire. If you dashboard and Slay the Spire when you're about to lose, you start the challenge over again. And this game does not do that. And I think it autosaves after every hand. So I actually tried it on that run, and it was like, nah, motherfucker, you lost, bro.
Yeah, I like that too, because like actually pushing you to be like, no, this is what you wanted to do. You're gonna live with it.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah, that game's awesome, man. It's $14.99. Brett, it's free for you. Please play it. Please.
So what I thought was interesting, did you see that the game got taken down from a lot of stores because of the gambling? Actually, I know you did because you're the one who shared the post I saw. Yeah. How wild. I know the way that laws are written is really weird, but nothing about this game screams gambling as an actual thing. You're not interacting with real money. That's what I'm saying. Like
there's no
the
betting.
The game is the cards that are used in betting, and the same mechanics that you'd win with in betting.
And but there's chips, but
you can't spend any real money.
Nope.
There's no microtransactions in that game.
Not at the moment.
And it doesn't seem to push or encourage gambling. And it definitely doesn't have gambling in and of itself in the game. There's not like blind boxes of, what are you going to get? This is what you're going to get right here. This new Joker in this box. So I thought that was a really weird thing. But yeah, if you see this game and this sounds interesting to you at all, you should take the opportunity to go and support the devs if you can buy it. Because A, great price point. B, I always hate to see developers that suddenly blow up, and a lot of people are talking about this game suddenly, and then they get hit with some bullshit that they can't really control. So once they get it going and they say they're working on it, you should. It's the game I feel confident, even though I haven't played it, being like, yeah, support it.
Yeah,
it looks like people doing their best.
I would definitely say give it a shot. It's really fun. You won't regret it. So yeah, the last game on my list, I have been playing Dragon Age 2.
You motherfucker, you started it.
I did
start What a wildly different game to the rest of its series.
Oh my God, it's true. But
and even really Dreadwolf, I think, is going to be more like Inquisition in 1. 2 is just an action RPG, but I really like it.
I like 2 a lot. I think it's fun. It runs surprisingly well. I will say this is like a PS3 problem, but it's my biggest problem with the game is you spend the whole game with people going, Kirkwall's full. You can't come into Kirkwall. Kirkwall's full. But then you walk around Kirkwall and there's like 6 total people on the streets. And like, I know why. I know it's a technical limitation. I get it. But it's very funny when they're like, there's no more room. And then there's no people in the city whatsoever.
And like you said, the game runs surprisingly well for a... that was like 2010.
BioWare RPG?
Yeah, because Mass Effect 1 ran like trash even on Xbox 360.
Dude.
I never played the PS3 version that they later put out, like way later put out.
Yep, it's good.
Yeah, that's good. They had plenty of time to work on it. It should have been good.
Yeah.
That's an interesting one. I doubt you're far enough to have much to say. But Dragon Age 2 is an interesting game.
I think I'm like 8 hours in.
That's a lot further than I thought that you'd be.
Yeah. It's funny because, dude, I don't know if I talked about it on the show last week, but I bought an adapter for my PS3 that allows me to use my DualSense.
You did.
Revolutionary. Yeah. Revolutionary. It is so much better playing my PS3 with that controller. It's so much more comfortable. The only thing I don't like about it is the PS3 era was the era where aim and shoot was on L1 and R1, and a lot of games don't let you switch. So it is really hard to not pull the trigger.
Okay, so we're going to get into an interesting conversation that Blake and one of his friends and I had while we were playing Helldivers 2 the other day.
Okay.
Let me ask you a question there, Chris.
Go for it.
I don't think you were in this chat. You may, and you may remember it. But Blake and his friend were talking about the DualSense being an uncomfortable controller and all these different things, which huge disagree. But when we got to talking about it, I was saying how I don't mind the L1 R1 and the L2 R2 and any of that because I keep all four of my fingers, my index and my middle, on top of the controller at all times.
Mm-hmm.
And they thought that was fucking insane.
I don't do that either.
Clearly, I am a monster. I don't know. I would imagine, and this is just guesswork, Blake is a fairly lanky person. From what I understand, he's reasonably tall. He probably has long fingers is where I'm going at.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying, because I have fairly long fingers. I'm trying to figure out why it would not be uncomfortable for me to keep all four of them up. So like when I'm hitting L1 and R1, I'm using my index. And when I'm using L2 and R2, most of the time I'm using my middle finger.
No, I'm not. I don't do that. I don't like that.
So there you have it. To that end, I never minded in PlayStation games that they had L1, R1 be the buttons.
I don't mind it. It's not a bad thing. It's just when you have actual triggers, which the PS3 controller doesn't have, it feels unnatural. But that's because I only use my index fingers. So my index fingers rest on those triggers. And because I play so much PS5 on top of the PS3, I'm used to pulling the L2, R2. So like when I was trying to play Fallout, it was like a subtle difference in muscle memory because I don't have that problem on the PS3 controller.
Yeah.
But once I was playing with the DualSense, and I played a little bit. Very funny enough, I played it with my Xbox controller at first, and it was
your Pro controller.
No, just I have like a Cosmic controller, but I was an idiot because I didn't realize that I had. So when I was setting this up, I was playing with the other PS3 controller. The dongle came in and I started setting it up. I'm like, why is this controller working? It's because I'd never switched the PS3 controller from controller one. So the only controller I had connected was the Xbox one. So I'm playing with the Xbox. I finished Fallout 3 on an Xbox 360 controller. But yeah, now I'm using my extra DualSense and it's great. So yeah, Dragon Age 2, great game. I love it.
There you have it.
The best controller is the DualSense. What is it? DualSense 4. The PS4 controller is the best.
DualShock 4.
DualShock 4, yes. That's the best PlayStation controller, I think.
I quite like the DualSense, but I think ultimately speaking, the DualSense and the DualShock are close enough in comfort for me that I wouldn't pull strings. Like I wouldn't pull hairs to figure out which one I like more because I just don't give a shit.
No,
if the DualSense would have been essentially the DualShock 4 again, I'd have been fine.
Yeah, I agree. It's one of those things, though, I do think I might end up investing in a DualShock 4 because it's closer to the PS3, you know, that little bit. Yeah, I don't know how to explain it, but.
So let me go back to something you said anyway. You said the PlayStation 3 controller doesn't even have triggers. What do you call a trigger?
No, I'm just thinking about like if you look at
the fact that because like the PS3 one doesn't have a sloped upward L2 R2.
Right. It's
and
just
I
a little
assume that's
nub.
what you're getting at.
Yeah, it's a smaller nub, whereas the DualSense is a literal curved trigger.
Arch. Yeah, well, you know, it's basically the same size, but it curves downwards instead of upwards on the PS3.
Yeah, I've
always thought the PS3 was such an interesting thing because I would still call it a trigger because I mean you're pulling it downward and there's literal space for it to compress downwards, whereas L1 R1's not. It's just a button.
Sure.
So that's kind of how I view trigger. But I've heard someone else say that. I'm like, so what's a trigger to different people? And I ask that question anytime I hear that distinction because I think it's an interesting way to view it. Because if anything, I think the PS3's very odd cutaway design, which the PS4 had, the DualShock still had it, the DualShock 4, and the DualSense still has it, where you can see the back rounded part of the trigger. Like, you know, you have the flare for your finger to rest into, which I do think is an improvement over the PlayStation 3 controller, but then you can see the part of the trigger that's going down into it. And I always thought the PS3 was such a weird controller because of that, because it was really great for like racing games or anything like that. It wasn't as immediately feeling like, oh, obviously this is what I'd do in something like a shooter. I didn't hate it in a shooter like some people did, but that's also why shooters seem to want to be L1, R1 oriented.
Yeah.
But I'm with you. Why didn't they at least make most games to be like, if you want to put them on L2, R2, you can. And some games did.
Yeah, a couple do, but Fallout definitely didn't. And then I was playing. What was I playing? Infamous, and Infamous didn't let you.
Most of the first party games did not.
I don't know what it is about Infamous, dude. I turned that game on and turned it right off. I was like, no, I'm super good on this.
That is insane. Infamous 2 is so good.
I didn't say okay. Infamous 2. I said Infamous.
Oh, Infamous? Yeah. No, Infamous is fucking dated. I still love the game for what it was when I played it. That game would be hard to play today.
Yeah. I was like halfway through the game, so I think I did it. And I was like, oh, I'll go finish the trophies. And I just kind of started, and I was getting hit from all sides. And I was like, dude, no. Maybe I'll go play Infamous 2, but not this. I'm good.
Yeah. I think it doesn't help that you started mid-game.
No, it definitely
Infamous
doesn't.
1 is, in my opinion, arguably a harder game and even a harder platinum because the way that stunts work is insane.
Yep. And the shards, awful.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. Like, don't get me wrong. It's the first platinum I ever got. I love that game to death when it first came out. I would kill for an Infamous 1 remake while we're in the year of remakes. But we'll get to talk about that in a second. I'm going to wrap up. I beat Banishers this week. Banishers is crazy. I don't see how that game has as much content as it does, has the production value that it does, everything, and is not only a AA game, but not even full priced. That game blows my mind, and I am a firm believer right now, and this is going to kind of couple into the next game I talk about too. Hints. But anyway, Banishers is crazy value in modern gaming. And the reason I say that is that Banishers was clearly made on a budget to be considered AA, and yet hardly ever is that really visible. Through and through. I think the writing across the board is surprisingly great, even for side content. I didn't do all of it because I decided that with Rebirth coming out, I wanted to go ahead and wrap up Banishers. But all the side hauntings I did had the same level of care and writing that the main quest did. That was surprising. And how much stuff there is to do in the game, how large the game world is, all of that. It's like 60 or 70 hours of content probably in a little $60 AA package.
Wow.
Just surprising. And that kind of couples into moving into Rebirth. Two very important things to say about Rebirth. Before the obvious statement, Rebirth is very good. So we'll start there. But the other two things to say about it, Chris, we've recently had a conversation about how games like Maneater are great and how we wish that AAA gaming would have the balls to do something like that. And let me tell you, Final Fantasy VII is the fucking weirdest modern game because I didn't play RE4 Remake yet. That is probably one of the only other games I can imagine that is as modern as it is in its game design and everything and its production value, but is goofy as fuck with its camp and weirdness as Final Fantasy VII is. I would argue Final Fantasy VII's even more. I don't want to get into like spoiler territory. It's almost hard to talk about it, but there are so many mini games and weird concepts that are thrown into the main story to progress the main quest that you would never expect in a modern AAA game. It's something you could expect from side content. Like, the side content will get a little goofy and weird. But no, this is main story level. Like Yakuza, it's a Japanese thing. That's what I'm getting at. The way that Japanese people view AAA is so different to me. And I think it goes across the board. Because not only does it have some of the craziest shit that I've seen, I won't say too much, but there's a part where I need to make an incredibly high jump. And I have to ride on a dolphin's back by holding its fin and then do fucking flips off of the back of the dolphin to get high up into the air and reach this ledge. But not only do I just have to ride the dolphin and go over and do that, before I get to the part where I can do the jump, I've got to go through a fucking... like a race course.
Okay.
Yeah, and the game is full of that kind of shit. But at a AAA level. Really surprising. But the other thing that I thought was interesting, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth at times looks better than Remake, and at times looks worse, and they don't give a shit. I think it's the right call. The game is way bigger because it's open world, and I think they go, we want to make a more interesting game than what Remake was. We don't want to just do another game that's very closed and oriented like Remake is, so we're going to go much bigger. Going much bigger means much bigger performance demands, and so at times where we need to, Cloud may look a little fucked up. Maybe he doesn't look as good as he did in Remake, but it's always in areas where you're not going to really notice it. In areas that are a lot tighter and a lot more compact, or cutscenes that are in engine and in real time, they always swap to the highest quality model, and 90% of the game looks incredible. But sometimes it does look pretty rough, but they just don't give a shit, and it's the right call. I saw people on Twitter criticizing the game because when Cloud jumps into water, you can swim in this game, by the way. Nice. If that wasn't clear. When Cloud jumps into the water and gets out, he's not dripping water. And people are like, this is fucking 2024. Yeah, it is. And I know Uncharted on PS3 in 2007 showed you what you could do with having your character go off. But is this Uncharted? No. It's the fucking JRPG. The fact that you even get to swim should be enough. Does it matter that your character drips water? Not even in the fucking slightest. And I give Square credit for having the balls to be like, yeah, we're AAA. That doesn't mean every single aspect of the game has to be bleeding cutting edge. I think they use their money more wisely elsewhere.
Really? Okay.
Lastly, we're talking about card games. Chris, not that this is anything new to Final Fantasy, even though a lot of people do not like Triple Triad in Final Fantasy VIII. There was a card game in this game called Queen's Blood, and I'm very interested for you to get around to playing the game and playing Queen's Blood.
Okay, hell yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm going to put it at the level of Gwent, but I think it's very fun, and it's an interesting idea.
Level of Gwent, he says.
Gwent from within Witcher 3, just to clarify, not the Gwent standalone game, which I never played, so I don't know if they made any changes.
It's a good game.
But, servers are dead for it already, right?
Yeah, they shut it off, which sucks because that was one me and Sean would play a lot of. And he was like competitive level good at Gwent. It was pretty cool.
Yeah. Gwent's wild. But yeah, I love that. This game is an RPG in many ways that are quite surprising than I didn't expect. So it's great to see. I don't know what they're going to do or how they're going to try and reinvent the game. But in modern gaming, it feels like most sequels are trying to do the same thing, but just a little bit better. And I don't even mean that as a huge detriment. Spider-Man 2 is more of what you got from Spider-Man 1, but better. Mm-hmm. Traversal's better, but it's still the same basic premise as the first game. Horizon 2 is just a bigger game with more dinosaurs and more pretty environments. It's pretty rare that a sequel goes, okay, yeah, this is part 2 of a 3-part story, and suddenly we're an open world game with a ton of mini games. Okay, cool.
Sick.
I don't feel like you see that very often. Usually it'd be like, okay, we're going to still be close to what we were, maybe a little more hub oriented. But no, this is just very large open world segments with a lot of exploration and some interesting ideas. So when you do get around to Rebirth, as you've continued to be playing, also you didn't mention that you have been playing Remake.
I have.
And you have surpassed where you originally put the game down.
This is true. I did. Yeah, I'm on where am I in Remake? I just beat Hell House. Yeah, I literally just beat Hell House. I dropped Aerith off to go get changed or whatever, and that was it.
Yeah. Spoiler free as you can get right there. That's pretty good.
Yeah, I thought I did a pretty good job there.
Yeah, you did good. So yeah, with that in mind, when you get to Rebirth, I'm surprised to see how you react to it, because I think it's going to bring a little bit more of what you may have wanted from Remake into the game. In my opinion, it brings way more of what people wanted out of the first one into this one. And it does a better job at being an open world than Final Fantasy 15 did. I was really worried, and I thought they would never make another open world Final Fantasy game after 15. Because even 16 is not really open world. It's like hub areas that you go through. But I dare to say, as far as I'm in the second large section of the open world, that they have damn it, I think they may have pulled it off, from an open world standpoint. And that's good.
Done did it, eh?
Yeah. So, it comes with weird things. Like, how do you feel about when games make you do a weird, tedious activity, but you're like, well, I guess it's better than just having me walk up to a door and it open, but I don't necessarily know if I want to go pick up this cart and push it at a super slow pace over to here so that I can suck up some Mako so that this door will open. It's like tedium, but in an effort to try and make you more engaged with the game.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I get it, but I don't like it.
I do too, but then you look at something like Death Stranding, where people complained about Death Stranding being a walking simulator, but his answer to do that was, I make the act of walking a mechanic. You're engaged because you have to be to do the game successfully. And I think I like that version of it more than I like, hey, we want you to open a door, so we're just going to create some really dumb reason as to why you have to do something else first. I don't know. It's a too big of a conversation to get into, but it's a weird one in modern gaming. Sometimes the minutia is there and just like, okay, I guess.
There you go, right? So, sure.
Yeah, Rebirth is awesome. I'm not super far. I'm in chapter 4, about to be chapter 5, I think. So if you've been playing it, hopefully that gives you some kind of clue as to where I'm at. But yeah, it just made me realize that the only way you get a game that's as goofy and weird as this nowadays is if someone's remaking a 20-year-old, 30-year-old game. Because that's exactly, like I said, I'm pretty sure RE4 Remake, and Chris, I'm sure you can vouch for it, that game is just as goofy and campy probably as the original is, just with better production values.
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah. I don't think someone would write a new game the same way that 4 or even Final Fantasy 7 were, but in a way I kind of like it because it feels like it's harkening back to an older time, because it is. But it is. So, all right, Chris, we're going to get into the news. And I'm going to go ahead and say I had a very busy day. I forgot to put out a community stake, so we just don't have one. So
it happens.
There you have it. The first piece of news, though, as we're going to go into, is Helldivers 2 developers Arrowhead have announced that mechs will be coming soon to the game. Forbes has also reported that Helldivers has only lost about 4% of its player base so far. So the game is having very good retention, which is great. And yeah, mechs being tested and just added and not as part of some huge event goes back to what we were talking about, where they're just putting shit into the game as they see fit. Yeah. Instead of waiting for it to be part of a seasonal change or when the first expansion drops. That's cool. Because I feel like usually they hold mechs and all this other stuff for a big No Man's Sky style update. We're like, 6 months from now, we'll make a big update. They're just like, nah, fuck it. We got mechs working. You'll have them in a few days. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's cool. There's also been talk of them bringing the faction that was in Helldivers 1 that is not in this game back into this game. So keep an eye on the horizon for democracy. Man, this one's a hell of one. I think I'm going to save it for last. So next up, Dragon Age Dreadwolf is seemingly on track to release this year. EA says confidently. Which goes into a weird thing because EA is in a weird spot. They laid off a bunch of people and canceled a bunch of games, and then also said that they're moving away from licensed things because that's not going to make them money.
Mm-hmm.
Which is interesting because Dragon Age Dreadwolf is a good example of not being a licensed thing. It's something they own, but they still have licensed series that make them a lot of money. So all this in mind, what do you think is going on with EA and what they're saying? Because not only did EA say some pretty wild stuff about their future, another company that we're going to talk about in a bit said some wild stuff about their future that seems to go against what's been working for them. So what are your thoughts?
I don't know, man. I don't know what they're doing. Like, this seems like a very obvious, like, hey, don't... again, it depends. Like, they're still doing the Black Panther game. They're still doing the Iron Man game. So, I mean, I think in the end, this just means we're not doing Star Wars anymore. So, I guess kind of take that for what you will. Because that's how it reads.
Why did they just say that? because that's what I thought too. I'm like, so you canceled all the Star Wars projects you had, like Respawn's first-person shooter Star Wars game or whatever the hell it was, but you're keeping all these other ones. So what is it? Are they just too far in development to want to quit at this point? Is it like the lost value fallacy where they've put too much in to want to dip out of it? Or do they just have too much pride to say, we're worried that other people's Star Wars games will make more than ours? But here's the thing. There's no indication that the Star Wars Jedi subseries won't continue through this.
Yeah, and there's no reason it shouldn't. So to me, it almost seems like exactly what they should be doing is like, hey, you guys like that Star Wars game we made that one time? We're going to make another one. You know, that's what I would think. So who knows?
Well, Star Wars has got renewed competition since EA no longer has exclusive rights to it.
Yeah.
So I wonder if that's part of it. Like, are they looking at all these other games coming out, like, the Knights of the Old Republic remake that seems to be happening? We'll get into that news in a second. But there's that. There's, of course, the fact that Ubisoft is working on their own, which take for that what you will. I mean, Massive is a good developer, so hopefully that means good things for that. Yeah, this is just interesting, to say the very least. But hey, at least Dreadwolf seems like it's supposed to come this year.
It definitely does seem like it's supposed to come this year. So I don't know. I'll take that. That's cool. I hope it's good. That's really the most I have to say about it, sadly. But I'm sure it will be pretty good.
I want to skirt something in here that's interesting that you didn't put in the news, but I did put in the news call out, or the question call out. And it's around the fact that the same person who leaked, retrospectively now we know they leaked it correctly, whether dumb luck or not is to be determined. But the person who leaked that there was going to be a Gravity Rush movie and that we would see it at CES, which did happen, is now saying that they know of a Gravity Rush 2, not Gravity Rush 1, but a Gravity Rush 2 remaster for PS5 that is being play tested right now and looks to be intended to release in coming months. With a Gravity Rush movie in production, it does check out that Sony would want to make sure that they have another chance to try and make money off of the games they've already spent money on. The weird part I have here is, why the second game?
I don't know. The second
there's
game,
a psychology thing that I'm curious about here, and clearly Helldivers 2 is a good example of it not being a problem. People are buying Helldivers 2 despite never playing Helldivers 1. But Helldivers is not a story-driven game. So my question to you is, do you think that putting out a remaster of the second game in a series that is story-heavy, is that the right call to try and capitalize on the potential success of a movie versus either a bundle or the first game primarily?
No. But as someone who never played them, what I'm imagining is because Gravity Rush 2 was a PS4 game and not a Vita game, it's probably easier to upscale and make with more modern controls. That's my only guess why they would be doing Gravity Rush 2.
Yeah, as someone who played Gravity Rush 2, it played almost exactly like the remaster of Gravity Rush on PlayStation 4. So it is an odd thought process. It looked a little bit better. I mean, because it was made for the PS4.
Maybe they're just like, we don't want to get remake. We don't want to remake getting made fun of for doing a remake of a remake game. So maybe it's just that.
Maybe, but and I know why they're doing this, because there's the thing of Gravity Rush 2 can only be played on PS5, but it's not a new product. And by nature of how we are as creatures, for some reason, even if it's a remaster, being a new product on the market is somehow more beneficial to launch coinciding with something if you want to get the attention and get new sales. Whereas you could just put out a Gravity Rush movie and say, Gravity Rush 2 is available on the PlayStation Store, but for some reason, since that's an old PS4 game, it's less likely to see a sales spike in the same way as a new PS5 Gravity Rush 2 would. And that's why I was going, a lot of these decisions seem to be based off of consumer psychology. So they must have something that tells them that starting with the second game, if this rumor is to be believed, is not going to be problematic. The psychology of it being a 2, despite there being a game before it, doesn't seem to have much of an impact on consumers' proclivity towards buying it.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? Maybe they just feel like this is the one that most easily sells through a trailer. I don't know. It could literally be that simple.
I have what it might. Well, now that I think about it, I'm pretty sure Raven was in Gravity Rush 1. Yep, she is. Originally, I was going to say maybe it's because they planned to have Raven be prominently featured in Gravity Rush, the movie. She's in 1, but you can't play as her, and in 2, you can play as her. So maybe it's the fact that they want to put out the game where you can play as both Cat and Raven. It's an interesting thing. Gravity Rush is one of those franchises that seems well dead and buried, and yet a movie and a game seem to be coming. And I guess that means that Sony's real thought process here is dead IP that did not make it in the gaming sphere might be able to make it in the movie sphere. But well, we'll see. Chris, I think you might be muted just so that you're aware.
I think that it could just be a situation where they think this will do well because it's going to be attractive actress moving and doing cool stuff. It could literally be that simple where they're like, yeah, this will sell because we're going to put Sydney Sweeney in a tight suit and make her do flips. Who knows? That could be it. It's Sony. They made Madam Web. So, and sold it off Sydney Sweeney. So they wouldn't be surprised they did it again.
How dare you discount Dakota Johnson? She did not go through 3 50 Shades movies. She did not free herself from these 50 Shades to be forgotten when she's Madam Web.
Yeah. Her mom died in the Amazon rainforest studying spiders or whatever. I don't know. I'm just a bigger Sydney Sweeney fan. Gotta be honest with you. I got 2 reasons why.
You and the whole world.
Yep.
Yeah, I just think it's an interesting thing because I still go to the fact of a few weeks ago we talked about it. I thought it was so weird that the movie seems to be more oriented towards looking live action, even if it's all CG. They're definitely going for a realistic look, and that seems so crazy to me because honestly, right now, Cat and Raven are waifu. You could totally get away with that. Mm-hmm. And if you just made an animated movie with like Studio Trigger, bro, why not? Also, not completely against the idea, once again, of a Studio Ghibli. Not that Studio Ghibli would do it, but a Studio Ghibli Gravity Rush movie would be sick.
You would be sick.
But also, so would Studio Trigger.
Doesn't it seem like Concrete Genie is more up Studio Ghibli's alley than Gravity Rush?
Honestly, yes. But, and I think you know this because you've seen enough of their movies, I think Gravity Rush has enough in common with some of their weirder things like Castle in the Sky and of course Spirited Away that I think that they know how to do that. They clearly have a keen eye for directing action in weird ways, and I think that that's all of Gravity Rush.
Yeah. Can we go the opposite way and get a Princess Mononoke movie or game, please?
Why not?
You mean like a Sucker Punch Princess Mononoke game? Whew.
Good luck getting Sucker Punch to do it.
I'll win the.
You think it would just be level 5 again?
I mean,
just do it with the Ni no Kuni team because that's already a Studio Ghibli tie-in.
I wouldn't want it to be an RPG though. I'd want it to be an action game.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it doesn't have to be an RPG just to be level 5, though. That is clearly their. Wait, let me say, Chris, what game that comes out today doesn't have some kind of fucking RPG mechanics in it?
Valid. Okay, good point.
I wish it weren't the case, Chris.
I guess let me put it that way. I don't want a turn-based battle system in a Mononoke game.
That's what you want, an action RPG.
Yes. If I'm going to if we're going to put the RPG tagline on it, make it an action RPG.
There you go. I feel you. All right. Next piece of news we're going to do here. Embracer is slowly shedding its skin as Saber Interactive, the team currently working with Sony on the remake of Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, is being sold to a private investment group for $500 million. It has also been reported that the beleaguered and stupid company is also shedding Gearbox, the team behind Borderlands 2 and Duke Nukem Forever, in a separate deal that should close sometime this month. This is interesting, because in the wake of having so many studios be acquired and the acquisition war going on, we are in a very weird position where one other edition of this, Toys for Bob, is breaking away from Activision and Microsoft to also become a independent developer.
Working with Microsoft. That's the weird part.
With Microsoft. That is weird, but they still basically want to have their own control and not be dictated in the same capacity. Instead, they want to pitch a game to Microsoft and then Microsoft say yay or nay, instead of having the way I imagine it is that when they were under Activision Blizzard likely got absorbed in the same way that Bethesda did, where what's very likely to be the case is that it's not Microsoft greenlighting the games. Because they're so big, Microsoft still has Bethesda greenlight the games. And I would imagine Activision has somebody who greenlights their games. And so Toys for Bob didn't want to be constrained by what Activision viewed as necessary or good. Instead, they wanted to be able to go out, still have a partner in Microsoft, more directly Microsoft, to be able to say, great, we have the backing of a big company, but without all the corporate structure of having to go through approval from Activision. Because I imagine Activision has to approve it, then probably Sarah Bond or Pete. What's that dude's name?
Matt Booty. I can't think of it. Pete Hines retired.
Matt Booty. Yeah, that's what I was trying to say. Matt Booty is probably like the next step, and then if needed, it goes to like a Phil Spencer or someone else who has to greenlight it at a board level. And the problem with that is, how do you make it even past the first rung? Where if you just partner with Microsoft, then you have one person that you have to get permission.
Well, here's the thing. I think this is obviously a good move for Toys for Bob, but I think this is a very sneaky Microsoft move because Toys for Bob is clearly making Spyro. And I think it would be a really interesting way for Microsoft to go if they just throw their hands up and are like, we don't own Toys for Bob. That's why this Spyro game is coming everywhere. It's not a first-party game.
I think it's interesting that you seem to be convinced that they are making a Spyro game.
Well, yeah, their press release says, hold on to your horns.
Yeah, of course. They're known for being the team to do the Spyro remaster.
I promise you they're making Spyro.
Hey, don't get me wrong. That's exactly what I would have expected them to have been making.
We can make a bet on the show if you'd like.
But here's the weird thing. I would have thought they would have made a new Spyro game before they developed a new Crash game, because they already made Spyro and remade it. They did not do the Insane trilogy, but that team doesn't exist anymore. They got pulled into Blizzard. So I find it so weird that Toys for Bob even got there, but they did an excellent job. Crash 4 is a great game.
Oh, it's probably the best Crash game. Is that a hot take?
There's so much nostalgia to the first three that I can't honestly answer that, so I will not. I won't comment.
It's the best Crash game.
Four is incredible, regardless of where it sits in order.
I even like 4, and I don't like platformers very much. So,
yeah. So, what do you think is going on though with all these studios breaking off and going independent when we were originally worried about everything conglomerating?
I don't know. I think it's just like your Embracer is finally falling apart, and I think this is probably better than them closing Saber. Obviously, Saber's got what, like 3,000 employees or something insane like that. So,
and Saber, I say this all the time: people do not realize how many games Saber has put their hands on.
Mm-hmm.
People don't realize Saber is directly responsible for a lot of the Master Chief Collection. At least it's at least coming to PC. If I remember correctly, I think that there was actually an article that I read that Saber helped develop Halo Infinite's multiplayer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
what I think is weird, I guess not weird, it's probably better, and I don't know what went on behind the scenes, but you would think for $500 million one of the big gaming companies would have bought that studio. It's the same thing I said about, Crystal Dynamics and Square Enix Montreal, but 500 million for Saber, you would think someone like Sony, who was like, this is how we get Star Wars under our banner, would have just bought Saber. I mean, I don't know. I don't know that they need 3,000 people.
How does that equal Star Wars under their banner? They've already paid for it.
Well, yeah, but now it's just like, okay, we're developing it. We can put more of our direct resource in it. I'm not saying it's necessarily a good thing, but you would think having that relationship, they'd be like, fuck it. Well, $500 million. All right, we'll bring them in. Hey, we'll bring back factions because we've got 3,000 people who can develop the multiplayer. Honestly,
that's what I was going to say, is that Saber would have made sense to be Sony's back-end multiplayer team.
Yeah.
Bungie doesn't have the resources to do so. Bungie can still be the purveyor of quality, but then they can just go, hey, Saber, you make all these multiplayer games. Because Saber does make single-player games here and there, or they've made some. But if you look at the vast majority of what they've made, they made like the World War Z game that was surprisingly all right. From everybody I know who played it said it was fun. They have worked and consulted on so many multiplayer games that they are an obvious team to be able to help that. But look, is the reality that everybody needs to buy everything? No. But it is kind of interesting that when Arrowhead is showing a small team breaking sales, expectations many times over, that Sony wouldn't be like, 500 million is a pretty low price to be able to probably hit that again with another team that, we can throw games at. But it's hard to say. The hardest thing about industry is knowing what the lightning was for you to try to attempt to catch it again. That's the hard part, because it's like, what element is it? Is it the game? Is it the type of game? Is it the industry? Is it something we can pull over and borrow from another team? Or is it specifically the team? And that's such a hard question to answer.
Well, and that's why I put the caveat that we don't know on behind the scenes, because it also wouldn't surprise me if Saber was just like, we want to go private. These guys are willing to buy the company.
Yeah.
But for me, it's one of those things where in the gaming industry, it's like, why wouldn't you do this? Like Square Enix Montreal and Crystal Dynamics are the two biggest ones, because that was $300 million for a bunch of IP and two very good studios. And it's like, neither you nor Microsoft wanted to jump on that. Even EA. That's what surprises me, because you'd think like, oh, like how funny would it have been if they'd bought Square Enix and been like, you guys are going to make Uncharted, or Jesus, they bought Crystal Dynamics and been like, you guys are going to make Uncharted 5.
Yeah. I mean, who knows? But I think the part of me, of course, this is just my own head coming to the conclusion it wants to. Part of me likes to view this as like developers resisting the push in the industry toward conglomeration. By any time they have an opportunity to break away and go independent, they just do.
Yeah. No, I mean, and that's almost definitely the case. It's just funny to me, is just looking at numbers. You're like, you bought Bungie for 3.9 billion and Saber Interactive was too expensive. You know what I mean? It's one of those things. But again, it doesn't truly matter. And it clearly didn't happen. So,
well, and the reality is, like, there's rumors going around right now that Sony is in talks to buy Arrowheads. Does that make perfect sense? Of course it does.
Yeah.
Does that mean that I think it should happen? I'm torn. I'm sure any company likes the idea of when you're owned by someone, you're no longer you're no longer having to worry about the job security of everyone. When you're independent, one bad job can ruin the entire company and everyone goes away.
Yeah.
But if you're confident in your team and you're confident in your products, and as long as you budget to what your confidence level is, you should always be fine. But you never know what's going to happen. Conversely, you never know what's going to happen in a negative sense. You never know what's going to happen in a positive sense. And then Helldivers 2 comes out and has sold more copies than any of their games combined. So
I actually read a rumor that it's continuing to go up in sales as time goes on.
From what I understand, that's not a rumor. That was Matt Piscatella.
There you go.
And that is an actual analyst saying that this game is having an inverse curve or whatever, to where instead of sloping off with sales over time, typically every week past the first week continues to jump down, that this game continues to curve upwards and has more sales as the weeks go on.
It's kind of nuts.
And just so everyone understands, because I think sometimes people think, well, yeah, it's the sales are accumulating. No, it means that last week's sales were 2 million, and if it's saying the curve is going upwards, they're saying that this week's sales were 2.1 million, 2.2 million. Not that the totals crossed over time. It's that this week's sales outpaced the previous week's sales,
which is nuts. That doesn't happen.
That's insane. Yeah, and those are just made up numbers. I don't know what the actual numbers are. There's estimates that the player counts around 10 million for that game. And if that game has hit 10 million sales, that's truly insane for a game of that scope, scale, and size and budget. It's crazy to think.
If that game hit 10 million sales, Sony is going to kick the door down and buy Arrowhead. It doesn't matter if they want to be bought at that point.
Yeah, so it's really the secondary question I have with that is, do we as consumers want Arrowhead to be bought? Because did all of the practices that I truly think that Helldivers is one of the perfect setup games. It's got a great entry price point that gives the developers money immediately. But the rest of the game kind of has this, you bought a game, so we're giving you these things at a reasonable in-game expectation, but you can also buy it if you just want to. I think this game rides that line really well. Will they have the same ability to make those decisions when they're no longer someone who's partnering with Sony versus when they're wholly owned? Does Sony go, well, yeah, but now we literally own you. We say 100% what you do. Arguably, they say what they do when they give the budget, but it's a little different. It's a different structure. So I'm torn. I don't know what I want them to do. That's why, going back to that listener question, it's hard to gauge how I feel about Sony's. Well, it's hard to gauge how I feel about games as a service in general, but it's even more hard to know how I feel about Sony's games as a service, because this is the first one they've put out that's primarily that. Gran Turismo 7 is a games as a service, and if you actually look at it from its games as a service thing, it's a fucking monster. It's ridiculous. There are cars in the shop that you could buy that if you were to spend real world money equivalent, it'd be a $200 car.
Yeah.
So if you want to look at that as a games as a service thing, is it optional? Of course. Can you earn that money other ways? Of course. But if you look at that, that's a ridiculous. I mean, that racing games are essentially the better the car, the better you're going to do. So you could argue that by having the best car, that game is pay to win. And I love Gran Turismo 7, but it's not a shining example of the best practices for a live service game like Helldivers is. So is Helldivers the anomaly because they're not owned by them, or is that more in line with what Sony plans on doing with Fair Games and all these other games coming up? I don't know the answer.
It's one of those things, though, because I don't know if anyone would be super upset if they introduced armor sets. I wouldn't.
No, they already have that.
But I'm talking about
they're permanent, because this
like a
one's
$10
a rotating shop. Yeah,
I'm not even saying not a rotating shop, but a rotating shop.
I'm saying that's what's in the game right now. Is a rotating.
But
shop.
I'm saying, like, here's your Hellgast armor. It's $10. You know, and it comes with a Hellgast gun skin.
That's assuming it's $10, and I say that in a loving sense because, Chris, you play Apex, and I think you know this better than anyone. When a fucking Sea of Thieves ship costs $37, and from what I understand, most armor sets in games like Apex are well above the $10 point. If I'm wrong, please let me know. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think people actually would be a little bit more like, ooh, like, don't get me wrong, I don't think it would tank the game's popularity, but I do think that there's a weird balance that Helldivers has to strike right now where almost all of its sales are coming from good word of mouth. And the first time that they do something that was directly done like that, to be more like a normal games as a service, there would be, the word of mouth would shift at the very least. People would be like, they were doing good. But then they started to give in to the same things that others do. And is it reasonable to expect them to do that? I think so. But what does that do to word of mouth? And I don't know, because Apex was also built off word of mouth, and it's been, I don't know how driven by microtransactions at that capacity Apex was day one. So that's more of a you question. I think you started
Apex
playing
was always, well, it didn't start with microtransactions, but they introduced them later, I think, because it was basically in beta at the beginning. But I don't know. Again, I think you can get away with cosmetics, and I think what he said it, and I think it's true. Like, they have to earn the right to put cosmetics in, and I think they've done that. And again, if they went, hey, we're opening up Hellgast. I'm just spitballing. That we're opening up Hellgast. You're going to be fighting the Helgans. You can take this place, or even you're going to be joining with the Helgans. The Terminids and Automatons have invaded Helgan, right?
Dude, that would be so fucking sick. And we've talked about that.
It would be
that
so
would be
sick.
So cool
if they release that content and then they're like, hey, in the you earn this set of Hellgast armor, but you earn a Rico skin for $10. But you can also find the super credits, but you can get it now for $10. I think that's the difference with Helldivers is I can earn the premium currency in the game. So
you can earn in most other ones, but your point still stands.
I mean, I don't actually agree with you at all on that point.
Well, okay, let me not say most other
literally
ones. Let me back up, because I don't play in the same capacity.
In the game, there's a difference between getting
and earning
my battle pass money back in the battle pass than, hey, I'm not exploring, Kings Canyon and Apex. Be like, oh, there's an Apex coin drop over there. That's not happening, and that doesn't help.
Destiny gives you like the Eververse dust or whatever from like gaining certain levels.
Yeah, but
like after max.
But that's not silver.
You are correct. That is still a different. Yeah, they have a single currency, not a dual.
Right. And in this game, this game basically is like you can find silver in the game. So it's very much
not entirely true. They do have super credits and medals, but medals are like battle pass spend, which is also weird. Their battle pass is not earn a level, get an item. It's get medals for doing things that we want that would help the game, and then you can spend those on shit within this battle pass.
Yeah,
and the battle pass items are more than. I love that, because the battle pass items are more than strictly visual. Mm-hmm. They're actually like, oh, this is a boon. You can start the match with everyone having more health. You can start the match with everyone having more ammo. And that's a huge difference than you can look like a pumpkin. You know what I mean?
And that's the thing, though. Helldivers is the perfect game for this kind of stuff where, like, there's the argument that it could break immersion, but Helldivers is so funny that I would kind of be okay with my Helldiver having a big fucking rabbit suit on. I think that would just make the game funnier. Like, it would break my immersion to a degree, but me being like yesterday when I got kicked across the map by a charger, that would have been so much funnier if I was wearing a bunny suit. Like, I don't know how to explain it to you.
It's funny because I slightly disagree with you there. I think that they've shown in what the armor they already have is that they are willing to reference other things, because there are clearly items that look like they're inspired by Fallout. There are items that look like they're clearly inspired by the Helgen. Like the helmet that I wear looks very close to a Helgen helmet.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
There are clearly ODST references. And I don't know if you saw the little news blurb that somebody from within 343 or somewhere had mentioned that at one point in time they had pitched a game very similar to Helldivers that was going to be an ODST game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Orbital Drop Shock Troopers, and it just got canceled and never came about to be anything.
Dude, half the reason I hope this comes to Xbox is because the greatest enemies they could put in this game are the Flood and whatever the fucking enemies are in Gears. Those two,
Locust.
And I thought it was Locust, but that sounded wrong. But getting a Flood planet and a Locust planet, it would be worth. I know it's worth it is a weird way to say it, but it would be so cool to see that I would be totally happy. And I've advocated for it to come to Xbox before, so this isn't a console war thing. But
where I was going with that is I think that they've already shown with what armor is already in the game that they are willing to show armor from other things or give armor that's inspired by other things, but it's still going to be things that are within the art style of the game already. And I think that checks out. because everything that they have is something that already has a similar enough look to Helldivers that you can look at it and go, it doesn't look out of place here. An ODST suit would not look out of place here.
No.
I don't think a Helgen suit would look out of place here at all.
No, I think it works very well.
Yeah. Gears of War armor would work. Dude, Warhammer 40K would work.
Dude, Warhammer 40K. I didn't even think of that. That would be a sick one.
Dude, I think that this armor is already clearly inspired by that. Warhammer 40K uses skulls to adorn and be armor things, and this game has those little skull indentions at different spots.
Well, and hear me out. Hear me out. Oh my God. I just lost what I was going to say. Never mind. Keep going. Completely.
Well, to that end, I'm very curious how these things will go. It's just weird to see this and think about why the game is the way it is and how much that can be affected by being bought. That's really, if we're going back to the core of the conversation, is Helldivers a good games as a service because it's from an independent studio in spite of being published by Sony? Or is it a good game because of Sony? Or, at least because of their conjunction with Sony? Hard to say.
I agree. That would be interesting to see.
That would be interesting to see. Quickly going to run through this. India Hero Project, PlayStation has finally shown the fruit of that labor, at least shown it off. It's not ready to come out just yet. Just like a lot of the China Hero games took a while to come out. Some of them still taking a while, looking at you, Lost Soul aside. But with all that in mind, the 5 India Hero projects that they put out today on the PlayStation blog, you can go check it out. There are pictures for some of them. There are trailers for other ones. The first one is Meteora, the race against space-time from Big Boot Games. And this looks to be an arcade combat racer that just happens in space. There's a game called Fishbowl, and it is a slice of life story that takes players on a journey of nostalgia and melancholy. And this looks just like a game where you have inventory management. It almost has like I don't want to say this and make someone think otherwise, but it presents itself similarly to how they kind of interact with stuff with Stardew Valley. So interesting little game. There's a game called Mukti, which is a first-person story exploration game. So go check that out. That looks interesting. And this one looks sick. It's called Requital Gates of Blood, and it's a 2D side-scrolling action platformer based around Egyptian mythology. And it looks really cool just from the single art thing that they put out from it. The last one is Suri, the Seventh Note, and it's like a rhythm 2D action exploration game. So there you have it. These hero project ideas that PlayStation's been backing is putting out some interesting games that are being backed by PlayStation. And I still think this is an incredibly good way to break into an environment and find early talent.
I agree. This is really cool that they're doing this. And Fishbowl, I didn't actually see this until you mentioned it right now. Fishbowl looks awesome. And Requital looks really cool too. So
yeah, Requital looks quite cool. Yeah, so I think that this is a really good setup. Also, I just think that this is funny. The developer for Requital, who is an Indian-based developer, are called Holy Cow Productions. That is fucking awesome.
That's really good.
So,
did you see No Rest for the Wicked, the Moon Studios game?
Oh, no, I guess not.
Dude, you got to look at
Moon Studios is the Ori people, right?
The Ori people, yeah. And it's funny because
they announced it before, but they showed stuff on it.
They showed it. Yeah, it looks so good. Yeah, and that guy went on a whole Twitter thing where he was like, "Hey, don't use Game Pass for our game. It doesn't help Moon Studios," which people went after him for, and I thought it was kind of funny because the question he was asked was, "How do we directly support Moon Studios?" And he was like, "Well, don't play it on Game Pass." But then he also said, "Hey, why?" Someone asked him why it wasn't on PlayStation, and he said, "I don't know. Ask Phil Spencer." Basically, so maybe it'll show up.
So, man, there was so much stuff shown. It's almost hard to not want to do it. I want to quickly point out another thing because I didn't see Moon Studios, but I'm going to go check that out. So if that interests you, go check it out. But another thing that happened in this past week was Nacon Connect 2024, and this brought with it updates on a lot of games. a few of them to keep in mind is the Terminator survival game. And I'm going to go ahead and say it. That game looks cool. But if you don't like survival games, you'll probably like, damn it, why couldn't we have gotten something else? So with that in mind, know what you're getting into there, but it looks quite cool. There was updates on Test Drive Unlimited finally coming back with Solar Crown. Some people really love that. Terminator Survivals, like I said, is a survival game set in an open world. It looks good. I hope Chris will play it with me. We'll see.
Yeah, I will.
Few other ones that I want to highlight from there. Primary one for me, Ravenswatch looks really cool. It's like a top-down, kind of almost like Diablo-like game. So that looks pretty cool. It is co-op, which is also cool. Also, Chris, slide in. I finally played Ship of Fools, and it is fun.
Okay.
So if you ever want to get down and play some Ship of Fools, when Donovan was in last week, we sat down and we're just looking for something that we could hang out and talk while we were playing. Mm-hmm. And very few games. I would have thought the Survivalist would have been couch co-op. It is not.
No, that sucks.
But thankfully, Ship of Fools was. Anyway, the big game to take away from that. But this is the whole reason I even brought this up is that you talked about No Rest for the Wicked. Greedfall 2, The Dying World. And I put that in my games list. And here's my my worry here. The game is hitting early access in summer. I think it even mentioned June, but at the very least, summer 2024, hitting early access on PC. And I got to say, I don't know how I feel about a story-based single-player RPG hitting early access. Well, what I don't love about early access is, and I say this knowing that one of the highest rated games and best-selling games of all time in Baldur's Gate 3 did exactly this.
Okay, I won't say anything.
What I think is interesting about it is I hope that if they're using this for the same reason, which is to get the game out there, be able to make some money on it, which is important for a studio, but also to be able to get feedback and work on it accordingly, then I'm a little bit more okay with it. But if they're really just doing it so they can release the game earlier, start selling it earlier, and then eventually, do the full release, I don't love that thought process. So I'm hoping that people are learning the right lessons from Baldur's Gate and not the wrong lessons from Baldur's Gate. Because there's a lot of worlds where you can see people going, well, they released early access and people sold it sold like crazy. So if we just do the same thing, ergo money. That's not what I think. This disappoints me because I really wanted to play this year, and it seems super unlikely that I'm going to get to play this anytime soon on console.
Maybe next year.
But I also don't know if I want to play an early access single player RPG because it's usually not the full game.
Yeah, it'll probably be like Act 1.
And I don't want to play Act 1 and then wait for a year to play the rest of the game.
Yeah.
That's my thing. Early access makes perfect sense for games like Palworld, Minecraft. It makes perfect sense for roguelites, games that have infinite replayability. I don't know the benefit immediately of releasing a game into early access that's not complete, that has a limited set of play. Like, why would I not just play this once or maybe twice, the Act 1 that I can, and be like, this could be better, this is, not great, and then this is good, and then stop playing it until it comes out. I don't see the appeal. Like, this game has to have crazy replay value if this is going to work, in my opinion. I think Baldur's Gate has a little bit more of that. If I'm basing off of Greedfall 1, I don't see it here.
I mean, it depends on what you take from early access. If you're playing it to see the game develop, then yeah, it's worth it. If you're not, then you're just going to get a disappointing experience. So that's the thing. Know what you're getting into with it.
Sure. But that's pretty damning to my my Metacritic, because there's a very high chance that this just doesn't get reviewed.
Yeah, it's true. I forgot you took that.
I did take that because they said it was coming this year. They didn't say it was coming in early access.
Hey, you can always drop it.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know how I feel, but I can't drop it once it comes out and doesn't get reviewed, right? So
yeah, you'd have to do it before.
I gotta make my decision here, knowing what I know now. So with that in mind, I want to keep moving on into the news. But yeah, dude, so many games were talked about and announced this week. It's kind of hard to keep up with.
It was.
With that in mind, I think this is going to be the last thing we talk about. Then we're going to wrap the show up. I'm going to rip the Band-Aid off. Hogwarts Legacy has sold 22 million units and dethroned Call of Duty as the best-selling game of the year last year. And Suicide Squad killed the expectations. Justice League has failed to meet any expectations after launch. Celebrating that fact, Warner Brothers has announced that the company plans to commit more to free-to-play and live service games rather than embracing the, quote, very volatile AAA console market. Okay. What the hell's going on? This is where I really think the way I play games clouds me from being able to fully understand the intentions of these people, because I don't see why the guaranteed sales of a single player game that hit the success of Hogwarts Legacy comes into play, where you don't look at this and go, yeah, we need to at least make sure we keep making some of those. Mm-hmm. But instead what they do is go, well, Suicide Squad didn't work for us in the live service space, but maybe if we just take Harry Potter and Hogwarts Legacy and move it into the live service space, that'll work. So following my brain here, I look at taking a studio who is known for making great single player experiences that everyone beloved and were great selling, and they were industry leaders, and then you make them into Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League developers, whether by your forcing them or by their own decision, whatever it be. And you see how that goes, and you go, yeah, the best thing for us to do is take Hogwarts Legacy, a successful, industry-leading, one of the highest sold games that we've ever put out, and turn it into a live service game. What is going on here? How do you feel about this? And do you have any thought process as to where the higher-ups are seeing this and going, yeah, that makes sense?
My only thought is that despite what people are saying and how many people are playing Suicide Squad, it's doing better than we thought. Like, I don't know. I have to think that's what it is. Maybe people are just buying microtransactions and skins, and they're seeing that money come in and being like, this is still fine. I don't know. But you would think, looking at 9 years to do Suicide Squad, and then this is what happens with it, you'd think they'd go, yeah, this might not have been worth the time. But it clearly sent the wrong message to them. So
see, that's the thing. Like, from everything I can tell, Hogwarts Legacy took about 5 to 6 years to make, and made a buttload of money. So, again, it's really hard to look at this and go, was the wrong lesson learned in this situation? Like you said, there has to be something to Suicide Squad's numbers, whether or not you want to call it success, that is gearing them to go, yeah, even a worst case scenario live service game is better long term for us. But I still just, the interesting part to me is that they're moving more to free to play and live service games instead of just saying Hogwarts was a rousing success. And so we want to make sure that we continue to have a diversified portfolio of single player games that you can get lost in, but also live service games that you can get lost in that serve two different, they serve two different areas of the market. They serve two different areas of the consumer base and what players want. Sometimes we'll get both. We'll get the same consumers in both columns. Sometimes we'll attract different consumers. And that way we penetrate more of the market. This feels like, yeah, our single player game pretty much outsold everything. And we're just not going to do that much anymore.
Yeah, I don't. Maybe yours is the closest. I can't fathom why they'd be making this decision. I don't understand it.
This feels like From Software, and I guess who owns them? Kodokawa?
Yes.
That feels like Kodokawa going to From Software and going, guys, Elden Ring blew the fucking world up expectation-wise. You sold 30 million copies, 20 million, whatever it is, and in less than a year, you were one of the biggest games we've ever put out. Hear me out. What about a From Software games as a service?
That is, Brett, I got to be honest with you, that is the worst example you could have picked.
Because you apparently think that this will be so successful.
No, Tencent is literally doing that.
I mean, we don't fully know what Tencent's doing with Elden Ring Mobile, but there's a very strong inclination that it would be that.
We know what Tencent is doing with Elden Ring Mobile. They're making a gotcha
but hear
game.
me out. Hear me out. This is the difference. We don't know this yet. We know that Hogwarts Legacy is getting some form of a sequel. It's getting a follow-up of to a degree. We don't know if it's going to be Avalanche again. That's important. But if it is going to be Avalanche again, but they're going to pivot towards being live service, then that is the same as what we saw with taking Batman Arkham trilogy and then going, okay, guys, y'all were a rousing success. Now make a live service game. That's the difference. Tencent, a completely different developer, making an Elden Ring mobile game, fine. Having From Software themselves move from making that type of game to making a live service game, that's what I'm talking.
Yeah. I mean, fair. I don't know, man. I don't have a ton to say here because it doesn't make any sense. It just
see what I think. You Hannah Montana that shit. You hire someone. You make Hogwarts Legacy 2 so that the people who loved Hogwarts Legacy 1 can feel more of that and keep going forward. And then if you want a Harry Potter games as a service game, you hire someone else to do that. You get the best of both worlds, Chris.
Yeah. You do get the best of both worlds. I don't know. This just doesn't make any sense. Like, Hogwarts Legacy outsold the world last year. And again, it's Hogwarts. It wouldn't surprise me if this is like, hey, we're going to be doing more live service games, but some single player games like Hogwarts Legacy 2 and Mortal Kombat 1 is going to be more, or Mortal Kombat 2, I guess, is going to be more of a live service. And you're getting a sequel to Kill the Justice League, whether you want an Arkham Asylum game or not. You know, I think that's more where we're at. Because that's the thing, like, it doesn't make sense to pivot away from single player Harry Potter because, sorry to tell you, single player Harry Potter is always going to sell. Just like that Quidditch game is going to do huge numbers. So, to me, it's just a matter of picking and choosing your battles. So, I wish this comment had been more like, hey, we're still doing single player games, but they're taking a backseat to our more live service focus. But yeah, we're still making Hogwarts Legacy titles, and you might get a single player Batman game to make up for Suicide Squad, but you're also going to get another Suicide Squad and all this kind of stuff. So that's my hope for it.
Yeah. I'm looking it up real quick. Cause I do want to find the original, the original quote, so that we can actually read it in its full entirety and make sure. So for everyone else, they can make their own decision about what they think is being said here. So this is an IGN article, and it talks about how Warner Brothers wants to further invest in live service, even after Suicide Squad, Justice League failed to impress. That doesn't necessarily mean anything. This says Warner Brothers Discovery CEO and president of streaming and games, JB Perrette, spoke about the company's strategy during a Morgan Stanley event. He acknowledged the success of projects like the single-player Hogwarts Legacy, which managed to be last year's best-selling game in the U.S., but says the big business of AAA console releases can be volatile. So this is, quote, "That's a great business when you have a hit like Hogwarts Legacy. It makes the year look amazing," Perrette said. "Unfortunately, we also have disappointments. We just released Suicide Squad this quarter, which was not as strong. It just makes it very volatile," end quote. So it has other things going here. One of his other quotes right here is, "Within the studio segment, we're doubling down on games as an area where we want to think, where we want where we think there is a lot more growth opportunity that we can tap into with the IP that we have and some of the capabilities on the studio side, where we're uniquely positioned as both a publisher and developer of games. Rather than just launching a one and done console game, how do we develop a game around, for example, Hogwarts Legacy or Harry Potter, that is a live service where people can live and work and build and play in that world on an ongoing basis?
The thing that confused me about his quote is in the quote where he's talking about committing to live service games, he talks about how his live service game failed. So I don't get it. But look, I think the thing is, I genuinely think with a live service game, like here's the thing: if Rocksteady spent the next year fixing Suicide Squad, put it on PS Plus and Game Pass, and then pumped the microtransaction store, that is probably worth more for a bad game than going, hey, we fixed Hogwarts Legacy. And that's a bad example because, again, Harry Potter. Poop on a plate would sell for Harry Potter. But what I'm trying to say is, like, a bad game getting fixed single player doesn't do anything because it's being discounted, and then, oh, you're getting a great version of this game we sold for $70 a year down the line for $15. That's a different calculus, where if you go, hey, here's this free-to-play live service game. We've made it a lot better. It's not free-to-play, but here's this live service game. It's on PS Plus now. Give it a shot. If you really like it, hey, our season pass comes out next week, and it's featuring Deathstroke.
It's featuring the Joker, baby.
Oh, disgusting. So I think it's just a matter of, like, there's a lot more avenues for live service to be profitable, whereas a bad single player game, even fixed, is not going to do very great, right?
Or at least traditionally. Cyberpunk actually is a weird example of the exact opposite of what you're talking about, but that's such an anomaly in the gaming industry that it's worth looking at, but it can't be a thing where you look at it and go, this always happens.
Well, but I don't think it is the exact opposite. I think it proves my point, because they fixed Cyberpunk and you could get Cyberpunk for $5 at Best Buy.
You can't anymore.
You can't anymore, but you could have.
What's crazy about that game is that I bought an extra copy of that game so I didn't have to open my collector's edition for $5 at Best Buy and got the thing. My brother went to go buy it the other day. Even the used version's $30-something. And the new version is right back to full price. And what I think is interesting about that is if you looked, even when Cyberpunk wasn't doing too hot, but it was kind of on its way back up, when they released Edge Runners, the anime that they did in partnership with Studio Trigger, here's the insane part. Cyberpunk sales went fucking through the roof, even for a game that was considered to be broken less than a year ago.
Yeah. Look,
around a year ago.
We're arguing semantics, but the only point I'll make is I can get the PS4 version of Cyberpunk 2077, which comes with the PS5 version, for $18. But I can't get Phantom Liberty. So it goes to my point where I could get into a better version of Cyberpunk right now for significantly cheaper. And if I wanted to pay $60 for Cyberpunk, it would come with the DLC that they're selling for full price. So
the crazy thing about it is that surprisingly, even with a used market that allows for that, the game continues to climb and sell, or continues to sit very highly in sales rankings right now. The Witcher 3 did the same thing. A very weird sales tale. It continued to keep selling crazy throughout its lifespan, almost closer to what's going on with Helldivers 2 right now, but just for a single player game.
Yeah. No, exactly.
So, but I still want to stress that is the anomaly for a single player game. That is so seldom the case. If a single player game comes out broken, very rare is it that the game A even bothers to get fixed, but B gets fixed and then continues to sell well.
And look, No Man's Sky right now is
Days Gone is a perfect example, actually.
Yeah, it is. It's a great example.
That game hit its roughly 8 million sales, and then no one buys it, because why would you?
Sadly, well, it's free, Plus, so yeah.
So
make good games. Look, here's the thing: I don't give a fuck if your game is live service. I don't give a fuck if it's multiplayer. I don't give a fuck if it's a walking simulator. If it's good, make it. Okay, if they want to make good live service games, more power to them.
Yeah.
But I don't understand how they got this message from Suicide Squad and Harry Potter.
Here's my real, I don't even want to call it a critique. It's more of a curiosity around this. It takes so long to make a game these days that in the process of making a game like this, the landscape can shift so dramatically that this game doesn't work anymore. That's always been the case with any game in any area of the market. But because live service games are so much more expensive usually, because of the fact that they have a much easier way of extra monetization, what happens if you choose another game, you spend another 9 years on it, it comes out and it fails again? This plan that you've committed to no longer seems to be functioning, and now you've spent 18 years on 2 tries. Now, of course, do I hope it lasts that long, takes that long? No, but games are increasingly getting to the 5, 6, 7 year to make mark. And that means that, what do you do here? Do you pivot? Why was this game live service and they're going more towards it? But then we see games like Gotham Knights, which seems to have had live service implementations at one point in its development, and then they just pulled them all back and made the game a 4-player co-op game. Why'd you make the change there? Seemingly. That's not confirmed. We don't really know. But seemingly, if that is what happened, why make the change there? That's the curiosity. So do what you will with that information. It's like you said, it's such a hard pill to swallow, not because it's not what I want to hear, but because I don't understand the backing behind it. You're muted.
The evidence doesn't make any sense. There's no logic to it.
Yeah.
This is like being like, oh, the glove doesn't fit, but the guy covered in blood didn't kill his wife and her boyfriend. You know, it's like...
Yeah, Chris, it's just like that.
He only ran away in a white Bronco right in front of you, but no, he didn't do it. Come on, guys.
If the glove doesn't fit, you must have quit. Yeah. I think what this goes to show is that where we are, and I think this continues to get hammered home, where we are as consumers primarily, who just choose to talk about the thing that we enjoy, it goes to show the disconnect between what we find as understandable and reasonable versus what the companies do. They have information we'll never know. That's probably a big part of it. But outside looking in, it's very hard to see this and think, yeah, this is a good move.
Yeah.
So
we'll see. We'll see what they do in the next coming years.
We'll leave it at that. Chris, this was a short prepared episode. Things have been crazy. I did not bother reaching out for Velvet's Corners or much questions. We do have a couple. In relation to this, I want to go ahead and get it out. We have a listener who chimed in of his own accord, so thank you for doing so. RMG0731. He says, so if Bigwigs learned nothing, WB heads off of the success of Hogwarts Legacy and failure of Suicide Squad. Has noted they want to push for live service, mobile, and free-to-play, thus moving away from the volatile AAA games. Just as corporate heads thinking the COVID bubble would last forever, I have to ask, did someone hit them a little hard? I think we've more or less answered this, but I think it was interesting that he chose to bring in how corporate people looked at the COVID bubble, something we discussed last week a little bit, and kind of couple that in here. I feel like often enough we see big corporate heads make decisions that don't pan out because of bubbles. And that's kind of what we're getting at here. So, what is it with that? Is it just because of business being so oriented around chasing the hype that eventually there's going to be a company that tries to get in on the hype too late and misses the window?
I mean, I feel like that always kind of happens, right? If someone's always going to be late to the party.
Or they're late to the party, which is fine because the party's still going. But not only were they late to the party, they didn't even understand what the party was. So they're like, oh yeah, it's a costume party. or it's a normal party, and then he shows up like, oh, I thought this was a costume party, and he's wearing like a fucking 1990s, Jinkos and shit like that, and you're just like, okay. And that's kind of what I say here is like, you made a very good point. The reality of it is not that Suicide Squad had to be a failure. It's that it's just not a good enough game to have taken such a risk on to try and break into that market. There is a very real version of Suicide Squad being a great game, releasing into that market, showing up late to the party, but understanding what the party was and still benefiting from the party, and they just didn't do it here. Could they do it again? Maybe. Could they also do it and learn and know that, now we know what the party is, we can learn and adjust, and our next game will do it? Maybe.
Get ready for Suicide Squad Build the Justice League, a survival roguelike.
That's way more up my alley than what they gave us.
I know it is.
All right. So with that out of the way, we've got one more question. And I think that this plays nicely into a lot of what we've talked about this episode. And that is, involving both WB. So this would move outside of developers into publishers, but WB, what we're seeing with Arrowhead and Helldivers 2. And it comes from Jehudi MD, longtime listener, longtime patron. If you want to be like them and support our Patreon over at patreon.com/Nartech, please consider doing so for as little as $1 per month. It's a huge help. Jehudi says, or ask rather, do you think game developers pay too much or too little attention to fan feedback? And secondly, which would you prefer? If it's got to be on the extreme, which one would you prefer? I think that you and I may share the opinion on this, but I'm curious because I think you play more games where fan feedback matters than I tend to. So you have the floor, Chris. Do you think they pay too much or too little attention? And which of those?
Too much attention. Too much attention. It's fucking happening in Marvel Snap right now, and it's so goddamn frustrating, where people refuse to play around the most popular and telegraphed archetype in any fucking video game of all time, okay? The second I'm playing, like last month, okay, we were in a Hela meta. Now, what Hela does is she brings back all your discarded cards, okay? Hela is the single most telegraphed card of all time. Blade comes out, discard. Oh, they discarded an Infinite. Oh no, what are they going to do? I don't know. They're playing fucking Hela. So either play your tech cards that block it or retreat. But no, it's fucking whining for weeks on end. Hell is a problem. Hell needs to be nerfed. And this is actually the one time I really loved the Marvel Snap developers, where everyone was like, oh, this is like our old broken metas. And then they respond to the guy and they're like, yeah, Hela has like the 10th best win rate. It's not a broken meta. Learn to play around the card. And I'm like, thank God. But 99.9% of the time, they would have fucking nerfed Hela into the ground, and it would have been a stupid decision, all because a bunch of streamers are tired of playing against Hela, which is just a fun deck to play. Because you know what's really fun? Right. Killing your big cards and bringing them all back. You know what's really telegraphed? Discarding your big cards and bringing them all back. It's
so, Chris, you actually open a door to something I wanted to get into in this. And so might as well break into it right now, kick the door open instead of cracking it. You've added in a wrinkle, a layer at the very least.
Yeah.
Are they listening too much or too little to fan feedback? Is that your problem? Or are they listening too much to influencer feedback?
It's both. Because Marvel Snap has a public Discord where all the devs are and people can ask questions. And a lot of times, the guy who does it, his name is Glenn Jones, I believe, who does the balance. He'll respond and be like, you're just not right. But sometimes they'll be like, yes, this is a problem. We are going to nerf destroy. It's like, guys, what the fuck? It's kind of something I've said to you privately where it's like, sometimes cards should just be good. Like, a card doesn't have to be... I think I've said it on the show, and I'll say it for the rest of my life. You don't have to nerf something good when you could just make something else good.
Yeah, and this is something we've had a lot of conversations about. We've had it about things on the show when we've talked about Apex introducing guns, and the big struggle that developers go through in these situations is that you're right. When they make something good, they could just make something else equally or even better to help combat it. The problem that you run into there is you may have made something accidentally so good that you disrupt your planned power curve to have the game having a healthy, long life by making something without fully understanding how it'll interact with the rest of the game and the player base, and which inevitably happens. Always does. Every single card game in existence. There are cards from Yu-Gi-Oh! Early days that are so broken that they still are banned, because if you unban them, the power curve has still not hit a point where you could really do away with this. That happens in cards like Magic. The Black Lotus card is just banned, from what I understand. It doesn't really matter. You're not going to ever use it. I'm not as big into Magic. But all I'm getting at is every card game releases a card at some point. It doesn't matter if it's early days or what, that is so powerful that it ruins your ability to power curve the rest of the game up reasonably. And so the only option you have, unfortunately, sometimes is to go, yeah, that's just too much right now, and our game can't handle it without completely jumping past a ton of power curve and ruining a lot of the plans we had. So we have to scale this back, ban it, or nerf it. And it's weird,
That's I think a different thing, because like in Apex, it's like, yeah, okay, if this gun is so broken, you're not going to put another gun in there that's also incredibly broken, because then you're just fucking it up. So you have to fix one of the guns. But I think in Snap, it's especially annoying, because what they'll do, and they haven't done it too crazy. Snap has actually been pretty good with their balance, but it's one of those things where people get frustrated with Destroy, and Destroy is my favorite deck. If you play Marvel Snap, I have a full ink Destroy deck, so you know what that means. And people get up in arms with it because it's the most consistent deck. Okay, I can get my Deadpool up to 24, I can get my Null up to 50, and if you're not paying attention, you can lose to that deck. The thing again with Destroy is that it's incredibly televised. I know on turn 1 if someone's playing a Destroy deck. Okay, if I put Deadpool out there, you know exactly what the fuck I'm playing. I'm playing Deadpool Destroy, right? And the Snap community will complain, and even the devs are like, yeah, Destroy is a little too powerful. And it's like, no, Destroy is just consistent. So how about you go ahead and instead of nerfing the fuck out of Destroy and ruining my good time, you take an archetype like Discard, which is not a good archetype. Again, that's the most ridiculous part of the whole hella conversation that we've been having in the Marvel Snap community, is that Discard is not good. Okay, it's a combo deck. So if you don't get your cards, right? If I don't get my Invisible Woman, my MODOK, and my Hela, I'm going to lose. So how about instead of making it so that Destroy is the only consistent deck, you fix Discard so it's also consistent. And instead of nerfing the shit out of bounce decks, which, quick explainer, there are cards in Marvel Snap that gain power when you play on their location. Like a card like Bishop, anytime you play a card, he gains a power point. So you could play a bunch of 1-cost cards, put them all on the board, play Falcon, bring them all back, and then put them down again. That's how you synergize with Bishop. That's how you synergize with Hitmonkey. And instead of making that deck more competitive, they nerfed it into the ground. So it's not competitive. And that's, I think, my biggest problem with balance, is it's like, you don't need to fuck Destroy so that the other archetypes can keep up. How about you fix the other archetypes so that they can keep up with Destroy? Just because you mastered this one deck doesn't mean you don't have to fix the other ones. Okay? And even to me, I don't even think Destroy is my favorite deck because I get to play with Venom and Carnage, and it's really fun to play that type of game. But you don't have. It's not the best deck in the game.
So There's an extra wrinkle to all this. First of all, just going back to what I was saying, for anybody wondering, one of the big differences between something like Yu-Gi-Oh! And Magic and all these things is that they were card games first, and they are still card games, even though there are virtual ways to play them. And that means that for the most part, anything you do in the video game, you have to make sure that you can make sense of it in the real world game as well. Yu-Gi-Oh! Does have a different ban list for its digital version of the game in Master Duel, but a lot of the same cards are still banned. With that in mind, the extra wrinkle that comes down is that even with a different ban list, Yu-Gi-Oh! Cannot actually change what a card does in Master Duel only and not in the other one because they're intrinsically tied. The cards are doing the same things. They say the same things. They just let you play a couple of different banned cards or ban a couple of cards that are not banned in the normal version of the game.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the big reason for that is because once a card is printed and made, you cannot change it. The interesting thing to stuff like Apex with guns and games like Marvel Snap with cards is that when the game is entirely video game based, this is the real answer for you, Chris. It's easier to nerf one set of cards than it is to try and buff and balance and make sense of 8 other ones when you don't have to. The thing about Yu-Gi-Oh! Is when a card's printed, you either ban it, you can't nerf it. You either ban it. The closest you can get to nerfing in a real card game is limiting it, which is like the card doesn't change at all. It still does the exact same thing, but you can only do it twice. You can only do it with 2 of these cards in your deck now, or 1 instead of 3. Or you outright ban it. Those are your options. A game like Snap can just say, it's a virtual card game. We can completely change how this interacts because we're not anchored to anything real. And that creates an interesting thing. But as I've talked about with Apex and other games before, I hear it from people who play Call of Duty Warzone a lot as well. Guns get nerfed. And the real reason they get nerfed is because this might be the case in Snap. I haven't played it, so I don't want to say. But those games also live on the fact that they need people to stay playing them. Mm-hmm. But if you get used to playing the exact same thing, so to your point, it may be that they want to move people away from the destroy deck because they've been comfortable with it for too long, and it runs the risk of getting them bored of the game and leaving as a potential customer. Now, they run the same risk, and I'm sure in your opinion, by fucking with something that you enjoy, by making you go, at what point do I just put Marvel Snap down and they lose a customer anyway? But,
well, the problem with that, and again, this is a digital card game thing, but it's like one of my favorite Snap cards is Forge. Okay, I have let's see, hold on a second, so I can make sure I'm right here. So I've split. So splitting means I've earned enough credits and enough boosters playing this card to split it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 times. Right?
Okay.
So I've split that card 12 times, and then they just nerfed it to the point where there's no reason to use it.
Sure.
That's not fun either. And I think that's the point you were making, but like I can accept it for one card. It's like I had my time with Forge. I wish it would come back. But it's one card. But it's like, do you remember when Overwatch changed Mercy?
Unfortunately,
I know you didn't play it, but I wasn't sure if you remembered. So Overwatch 1, when it first came out, if anyone remembers OG, the good Overwatch, when you played Mercy, she was able to res every player on the team. So there were issues with that, right? Because as a Mercy, I was a Mercy main, and you would just, when you saw, oh shit, everyone's dying, you would just hide. Right? So you would just hide, you'd run back in and res everybody. That's how I played Mercy. And I was a fucking good Mercy. But they completely changed her kit. Completely changed her kit to the point where she doesn't even revive the same anymore. And I haven't played this game since launch, really. But I was someone, and the game would track how much time you spent with individual heroes. I had spent 100 hours only playing Mercy. And then you change the entire thing, and I never played Overwatch again. So it's one of those things where it's like I would just rather they found a way to fix that. I learned how to play this whole thing.
going back to the core of the question.
Yeah, hit me with the core.
It sounds like it's easy to infer, whether or not it's true, you can confirm, that since you have the feeling that they listen too much to fan and influencer feedback, therefore your preferred thing would be that they don't listen often enough. Does that track for you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I think to hammer in on some of your points, this is something that's been said a lot about a lot of games. The reality is, for whether they're video games or board games or actual game, TCG card games that are, printed, the people who play the games like to think that they understand the game enough to be able to make these sweeping decisions and whatnot. But the reality is, just because you play a game and just because you have ideas on it, your ideas in an individual sense might be art. But most of the time, the people who are playing the games do not understand what makes the game work. And because of that, listening to them too much runs the risk of changing the game so much that the thing that made it work disappears. That is a real worry that all game developers have to deal with. So I tend to lean on the side of hoping that they don't listen enough, because if a game is good, there's a good chance that it will stay good if they listen less often to fan feedback, because fans will suggest. The reality is how good is the suggestion from the fans? The reality is that probably 5% of what the fan group as a whole says is worth something, and the other 95% is trash. That's the reality. So if they're going off of listening to the 5% and ignoring the 95%, that falls into listening less often, therefore making a better product. So I'm going to go with Chris. I think that I don't want to say as a whole that I think all game developers listen too much. If anything, I'm going to say most game developers probably don't listen enough, and that's the right call.
Yeah. Here's the thing. If you're making your game and you have all the internal stats, I just trust you implicitly to make the right decisions about your game.
And it doesn't mean you're always going to be happy with them. But I think at the end of the day, like you said, they know what they're making and why they're making it. And while they can sometimes get it wrong, most of the time, they're going to make something close enough to the right call to be okay.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where I'd rather you are.
I think Helldivers is a game that stands to really benefit from that. But what's interesting is I haven't heard very much. It's still really new, and word of mouth and hype around it's very big. I've not heard much complaint in any direction about Helldivers 2. No, but you give it enough time, and there will start being people that be like, well, this should be this, and the stratagem should be called down like this instead. And eventually they're going to have to make a decision of when do they listen to the fans. The real question is, when do they bend the knee? That's the deeper. Are you listening to the fans because you hear them out and you realize that they are correct? Or are you bending the knee to change something you don't really want to change because you're worried that the fan base will leave you? That's the tell of a good developer. When they can spot good feedback and implement it, and when they can say, no, I'm not going to bend the knee just because these people want that. And that's what Snap is doing right now with Hella, at least.
Yeah.
So,
for the most part.
There
just don't
you
touch
have
it. Just leave it alone. Please leave it the fuck alone. God, stop ruining the things I like.
But I still say, Chris, as much as you say that, the game has to change for it to continue going. Even if you're happy with where it's at, they have to continue to bring in new players. They have to continue to keep the players they have, the players that are willing to stay with it, and that's hard. If I get to where I log in every time to Apex and the same gun I've been using for a year keeps doing me good, I'm eventually going to kind of be like, yeah, this is bored. Like, I'm bored. I've been playing the same game exactly for a year. So as much as it sucks to go, oh man, I love that gun, forcing you to change your play style is beneficial to everyone, actually.
Yeah, but I think
it doesn't feel it in the moment all the time,
The difference with Snap, and you know this, I've talked about the money I've spent on Snap, is that it's a huge investment.
So leaving is hard.
It's not even that leaving is hard, but like it's a giant investment, and I really like Destroy. And it's one of those things where it's like, sure, I understand that games sometimes need to change for the better, but my Destroy deck is probably worth $100. So at what point is it okay for I don't know how to even say this without sounding fucking entitled, because I understand that I'm not making the game and they can make the game they want to make, but at what point do you have to think about the people who are spending money on your game? Just like I think we've talked about it before. Well, they have the way that you acquire cards can be very expensive. So you tell me you put a card in a spotlight that was good. You knew it was too good. We knew it was too good. That's why we all bought it. But we all bought it, and now you're changing it. That's
people ask me why I don't play. People ask me why I don't play Master Duel, and I don't think Master Duel quite works that way because, again, it is anchored to a real TCG.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you this: I actually like Hearthstone as an idea. So let me shift to another game that I know. I like Hearthstone as an idea. I am absolutely not buying virtual packs. I am not buying virtual individual cards that I can do nothing with. If I can't trade them within your game, value lost, in my opinion. If I can't sell them when their use for me is gone, value lost, in my opinion. And I'm too stubborn, and real TCGs offer the ability to bring in cards that you want at whatever cost you want, or sell cards that you no longer need at whatever price you want and that the market will go towards. And does that mean that sometimes you sell a card and then it raises up in price later? Absolutely. But guess what? I didn't need the card. I wasn't going to play it. I still made $10, $60, $7, whatever it is. And I am in control of what I do. Do I begrudge people who play virtual ones? No, I understand it. I just can't fathom spending the money when, exactly what you said, you have no control. It'd be different if you felt like, well, they're messing up my Destroy deck, but I can sell and recoup some of my investment. But you can't, because that's not the way the game wants to work, because it's most beneficial for them if you and only you own your cards and you can't do anything else about it. And that sucks, because it does give you this sense of feeling like I've invested so much and this change is quite literally hurting my investment. It's like seeing a drop in the stock market coming and realizing that you can't sell. It was like whenever Robinhood stopped everybody from being able to trade their GameStop shares.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's it. It's like looking at your GameStop shares and going, oh, this shit's about to go way down and I'm going to miss my opportunity to do something. And then they go, nope, you can't sell them. And then they bottom out and you're just like, fuck. So,
yeah, I see what you're saying. You're not wrong.
And that's part of the appeal. I get it too. But
it is.
That's where we are. So, Jehudi, thanks for the question. If any of you listeners ever gonna want to ask any questions, you can do so. One last thing I'll comment on. I think this is a very quick question. That's why I'm willing to throw it in, even though we're pretty far into the episode. Chris, I saw that you were on Twitter. You saw what No Fate, another one of our patrons, was talking about. His disillusionment with VR. I don't think he bought it, so I think it's more of he perceived that it was not going to do well, and he feels validated and thinking that it hasn't done well. But he asked a question within this conversation between him and I that I thought was interesting. And it was he made a comment that I think is interesting, and then a couple of questions. So the comment was that he thought maybe PSVR 2 would have gotten more attention if Sony wasn't distracted by the acquisition of Activision. I don't know if I buy that. I don't really think Activision Blizzard had any real impact on Sony's game output or anything. Do you think that played into anything? I mean, what would that have really stopped? I mean, what would they have not done that they would have done just because It's not like their attention was elsewhere necessarily.
I don't know, because if you'd asked me at the time, I would have said they didn't announce games because of the acquisition, and
that's fair.
They didn't do a lot of stuff that they might have done because of it. But I think history has shown us that that's not the case. So to me, I don't know that I would necessarily agree with that. I think they just fumbled the bag to the point where if you told me, hey, this is why Jim Ryan got fired because he greenlit PSVR 2, I'd be like, yeah, okay. Obviously, he retired and we don't know that he got fired or if that was whatever.
I also
but
don't think he greenlit that. I'm pretty sure that was actually Sean Layden. It was in works for a long time.
Maybe. I'm just saying, like, if
but your point stands.
Yeah. If that was the reason, I wouldn't be surprised. So I don't really think it had anything to do with Activision. I think it was just a matter of it hit the market, it failed, and anything they were doing, they stopped.
I think that's the question. It's so hard to know if it failed or not. That's like really difficult to tell. They don't talk about it, which hints that at the very least it's not doing as well as they wanted, which is in and of itself a form of failure. But his two questions here I thought were interesting. One of them was, if Sony backs away from PSVR 2, do we ever see them entertain VR in the future? That's the first thing. Do you think if they ever decide to back away, they'd ever return?
It's a hard question because my gut says no. But I also really would not be surprised if they are just early on it.
That's what I'm thinking. I have a feeling. So look, as far as the question as if they do back away, will we ever see them come back around to it? I think that there's a chance. But here's my real answer. I don't think they're going to back away from PSVR 2 for the fact that, A, it's a pretty premium product. They seem to have sold it not at a loss. And this is the important part. Much like games as a service blew up and much like game streaming has come around, I think Sony has got eyes on the industry and sees if there's a chance that VR does blow up, we want to already be in it. And to that end, Sony never got rid of game streaming, even though it wasn't really popular and didn't work well enough when they started it. And now game streaming is coming around to be something that's beneficial to them, and it's actually starting to get somewhere. And the same technology that gave us remote play at the same time that they got game streaming has come together to make the Portal, which has done way better than they ever anticipated. Mm-hmm. So I think Sony has validation in seeing things come around as a great idea further down the line and are trying not to pull a Microsoft or a Google with it and cutting it too early. My reason here is tied into this other question, which is VR just a 3D TV gimmick that comes and goes? My immediate answer to that is no. And the reason is 3D TV lasted, let me reword this. VR has lasted so much longer than 3D TVs ever did, and have gotten so much more support than 3D TVs ever did. And with that in mind, I think it's hard to look at this and say it's a gimmick that's going to come and go in the same capacity, because 3D TVs really genuinely did come and go. Yeah. And motion-based gaming came and went outside of its use in VR, where it makes way more sense. And it came, was a little hot spot for 4 or 5 years, and then left. That's really what happened. So if I look at that, Sony already backed out of 3D very quickly, very easily. I don't think PSVR 2 would have been made if they were willing to back out this easily. So I think they'll make it. They'll give it very lightweight support and then wait around to see if VR is really going to take off. And I think as long as Oculus is really pushing for VR to do something, Sony's going to stay in the background waiting.
Yeah. I think what they need to do if they want to be big in VR is try and make less of a high-end machine and make something more casual. Because I love the fidelity and the controllers in VR too, but I think that makes it more expensive. And I think
does.
the real audience for VR is kids, right? Because we're
Can't
old.
do kids.
Why?
Explain what you mean by kids, actually. What's the age range you're talking?
I don't know. Not me. My problem is that I'm old and I think if you're looking to revolutionize the game, how games are played, it doesn't start with you and me. And that's the problem with a $600 machine, is that you can't buy this for your teenager as a supplement where you can go and get a MetaQuest 3 or 18 or whatever it is, hand it to your kid and go, you don't need a PC, you don't need wires, have fun. And
Sure.
they can get immersed in that, where I've been playing flat screen video games for my whole life. And while this is appealing and fun, you're not changing anything for me. I'd still rather take it off and play Pistol Whip on a controller, even though it would be less fun in all likelihood. So I think they should go a more casual, get a PSVR 2 with a God of War experience and a Astrobot game and GT7, sell it for $300. Make it look less nice, make it wireless. That's how I think you really have to penetrate this. This is a luxury item.
Yeah.
Like, who's the audience for it?
Yeah. And what's kind of crazy is, in the actual vein of VR, even the PSVR 2 is actually well priced in comparison to what a lot of the competition is doing, which is crazy, because what it really shows is that they're not going quite as low as Meta with the Oculus, but they're not going as high as like the $1,000, Valve headset or the HTC Vive headset that was much more expensive. Instead, you're paying $600, which is a lot of money, and I'm not discounting that, but it's firmly in the middle. And I think Sony is pricing themselves firmly in the middle while having technology. They're doing the exact thing that consoles have always done. Pricing yourself in the middle while having a lot of the touchstones of technology, or even some things that the higher end things don't have. So in the VR space, PSVR is one of the only headsets with foveated rendering, even though it's $400 cheaper than the Steam, the Valve headset that just came out right before it. And to that end, you look and you go, huh. So they're pushing the tech and being like, yeah, come over here and play it with us, because they make money off of it in a way that, HTC can't.
Yeah.
They can't sell games in a marketplace that they make money off of, which is the primary goal for PlayStation. So I don't know. I think it's interesting. As for kids, I don't know if you're aware of it, but there's all sorts of things that go into why kids are not supposed to spend much, if any, time in VR. It's a super interesting thing that you should look into. It goes all the way from neck strain on young, underdeveloped necks, to eye strain on underdeveloped eyes, to problems of myopia, where children who do not get enough sunlight, specifically the stuff that's in actual, I can't think of the name of that right now.
Sunlight.
Well, what's
Vitamin
in
D.
sun? Like, what are the rays or whatever? I can't.
UV light.
Yeah, UV. Something about UV specifically getting into your eyes helps develop your eyes to where you have an easier time focusing on things that are far away.
Yeah,
and whatnot.
I didn't mean literal children.
I just want to make sure, because like even my daughter at 8, I let her play for about 15 to 20 minutes at a time, very scarcely.
I'm talking
because
about
apparently
lowest 13.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. I think it's really interesting. Yeah. So they were talking about kids age 4 to 14 throughout all these studies. But even then, the numbers on studies for VR are incredibly low. So it's an interesting thing to see. But yeah, with that in mind, we'll, of course, over time see what Sony does. But I wouldn't count them out just yet. I think they'll lurk in the shadows like they did with streaming until streaming became relevant enough for them to be like, we've rebranded.
The Gaikai is now good.
Also, just to throw it out there, Portal is not quite a handheld. But I don't think anybody well, it is, but it's not in the same vein. I don't think anyone expected Sony to revisit handhelds, and yet we have the Portal.
And we have rumors of another Vita type thing.
I'm a little dubious of those rumors, if I'm being honest, but I would love for them to be true. We'll see. So with that in mind, this has been episode 343. Halo and goodbye. Of Triangle Square to PlayStation Podcast. Chris, thanks for joining me as always, sir.
It's a great time.
What do you think a good community stake is here? What's wrong with WB?
Yeah. How do you, I don't know, meta balance maybe? That might be fun.
Are you a monster like me? Do you put all four fingers on the L1, L2, or I'm just going to go ahead and throw it. I'm a more diverse player. I my hands can, that's why I don't suck at games like most of y'all do.
I've played Helldivers with him, so I know he's capping. At least you don't use the claw. Like I've seen people with the. Have you seen the claw?
I mean, when I think of the claw, I think back to Monster Hunter on PSP, where you didn't have another analog stick, so you had to but you had to swing with L and R. So what you had to do to turn the camera is keep your thumb up on the D-pad, and your fingers looked ridiculous. It was called the claw.
That's close, but when I think of the claw, I think of people who hold the controller like this.
That is, oh my god, that's basically it.
Because they can touch all the buttons and do that. It hurt me just to show it off. So I'm not a claw person, but I know people who are, and it's insane. Good at shooters though. So
there you have it. You heard it here first. Chris said I suck, even though I clearly don't. So I don't know what's going on here, Chris. Look, this is intervention time. Do I suck at Helldivers or something?
No, I was just giving you shit.
I need to know for the sake of democracy.
Yeah,
you keep putting me in suicide mission level when I was level 12. This is a real story. I was level 8 the first time I played suicide mission difficulty.
Yeah, it's just gameplay, man.
And I made it through. So I can't be that bad. That'll be my argument. I can't be that bad.
This is the guy who goes, "Oh, I forgot to tell you, I threw a carpet bomb. Good luck."
Chris, that happened literally once.
That's too many times. If it was real life, you don't get to tell me in the afterlife.
You're right.
Dude, I only killed you one time.
In my argument, I was pretty new to the game at that point, and Sean, even as much as the last time we played, has killed me so many times.
Yeah. So, I'm not saying he's any better. I never said you were better or worse. All I'm saying is half the time we play, I'm out there clearing missions on my own. So I feel pretty okay at Helldivers. So,
I mean, you're good at Helldivers, Chris.
Oh, thanks.
I never implied differently.
Helldivers is a great game.
Helldivers is a great game.
Names. Let's go play Helldivers.
Yeah, let's do something else. All right, guys. Thanks for listening to the episode. As always, we shout out our patrons who went over to patreon.com/nartech and gave us a little over $1 per month to support the show. Thanks to each and every one of you. And that starts with Duh Overlord, Spencer, Brandon Edwards, Alex, Barry Rogers, Stingray X, Easton 328, Aztec King, Lecheon69, The Lord Corgi, Bailey Robertson, Mark Schutz, Cypher Primus, Kyle Grimm, Rude Days 93, Kevin Bacon Bits, Danny Villalobos, Jehudi MD, No Fate, Josh Ayers, Derek Porter, Donovan Williams, Matthew Green, and Sean Santarud. Thanks to each and every one of you. See you next week.
Yeah.